Suyun Ryong spent 50 years in a world that wasn't his, and all he got out of it was a soap recipe. We open on an old man spitting blood in the middle of a blizzard. A little girl shows up at his door, says her mom told her to bring this for old man Su. She sets a small bread roll on the floor and tells him to get better so he can make more of that soap. Sweet kid. The old man thanks her, and she disappears back into the storm. And once she's gone, he mutters to himself again. I am an inhabitant of planet Earth. Someone who came from a civilized world 50 years ago. 50 years. That's how long this man has been stuck in a world he never asked to be in. He doesn't even know how it happened. One day, he was on his way to a work lecture with his coworkers. Normal day, normal commute. Then a landslide swept them all away. Should have killed everyone right there. But instead of dying, they all woke up somewhere else entirely in front of a giant fox with 3 tails and a 2-headed snake. People flying through the skies around them. Strange energy humming in the air, the kind of stuff that reminded Su of those novels he'd read from time to time. You know, the light novel Isekai fantasy type of setting. But even though Su recognized what this was, he never imagined that all of his colleagues would end up having a much better life than him. Because here's what happened. Creatures known as the sages descended from the heavens. They took one look at the group and got excited. Apparently, Su's co-workers were loaded with hidden talent. Every single one of them got singled out. Each sage claimed someone and whisked them off to different parts of the world and the heavens. One by one, his friends disappeared into the sky with their new masters. And who was left? Just 2 people. Su and Director Kim, standing there in the dirt while the sages flew off without a backward glance. They held on to hope for a while. They told themselves we're from another world too, right? Something special has to eventually happen to us. But as time began to pass, they both realized the truth. There was nothing special about either of them. All they could do was manual labor to survive. 6 months of that was enough for Director Kim. The man couldn't go on living that way. So he put together the little money they'd scraped up from manual work and bought a basic martial arts book. The cheapest kind, the type that's sold on any random street corner. And here's where the story gets painful. In just 3 months, Director Kim mastered the entire book. 3 months. He became a martial arts master off a bargain bin manual, started working for the nation, learned more and more advanced techniques. Before long, this man became a powerful warrior known throughout the entire world. Meanwhile, Su was left behind, and to this day he still wonders was there something special in store for him. He always believed so. He kept that hope alive year after year, but time passed and absolutely nothing happened. And now, after 50 years, he's just an old man about to die alone from a common cold. But it's not like Su didn't try. The man tried his hardest to survive in this world. He learned the language, learned to write, figured out how to earn money. He bought a small plot of land and built his own house. And using his knowledge from Earth, he started making things this world had never seen, like soap, for example. This world was much less civilized, and he knew concepts that were completely new here. For a while, it actually worked. He was selling soap, making money, building something. Then the martial world reminded him who he was dealing with. The market here is competitive. People with actual power noticed his product, stole his recipe, invested massive money into large-scale production, and pushed Su right out of the business. Gone. Just like that. In novels, the isekai protagonist invents soap and becomes a billionaire. In Suyun Ryong's story, the isekai protagonist invents soap and watches richer guys get wealthy off his own recipe. Since then, it hasn't been easy to make even enough money to get by, and now there he is, waiting for death, rejected by this world in every possible way. He wonders what did they expect him to do. He tried his best. So what was the right path? Why was he chosen to come here if he wasn't special? And why did he have to keep on living just to have everything taken from him? At that moment, he no longer even has the energy to keep his eyes open. All he wanted was a little more power, or perhaps just one opportunity. And just like that, the man died. However, we can't end everything here. There he is, eyes opening, staring at his own hand, confused. Why is he alive? And why is he wearing the same clothes he had on when he first arrived from Earth? He looks around, and in front of him are all of his co-workers groaning, rubbing their heads, asking where they are. One of the guys, the one Su thinks is Kim, comments that they were on a trip. So how did they end up here? Obviously, this is the very first day they arrived in this world, right after the accident. When they hit the ground, Su remembers seeing a strange light before opening his eyes here, and that's when it hits him. He had come to this world with a power after all. Yes, indeed. The power of regression. The problem is, this was 50 years ago. It's hard for him to really remember how things worked. His memories are faded, blurry, he lived for too long. Someone is calling for Manager Seo, and our boy is just standing there, lost in thought about what it means that he's regressed. And look, in most regression stories, the main character immediately starts speedrunning the timeline. They know the future. They know where every treasure is. They know who wins, who loses, who betrays who. Suyun Ryong? All he learned in 50 years was how to make soap, and he barely even remembers the details of the past because he lived too damn long. This is easily the worst regression cheat in the history of Manhwa. The guy calling for him is getting louder now, shouting Soo-Yun Ryong's name, telling him to look over and stop ignoring everyone. Soo is about to apologize for not turning around when the guy just straight up punches him in the face, out of nowhere. The girls and the rest of the group just stand there with their mouths hanging open, completely confused. The guy who called him says he's an idiot who must have fallen asleep while driving and made everyone fall into that hole. Apparently, this fool doesn't even realize they actually died. He's acting like it was just a bad car accident and almost everyone was killed. But here's the thing, Soo had forgotten something. It had been a very long time since anyone called him manager. 50 years to be exact. That title belonged to a different life. That's why he didn't even realize the guy was talking to him. And the man asks if Manager C was trying to lose his job the moment they get back. Soo finally recognizes him. Section Chief John Mayang-hoon, the son of a butterfly. A scumbag who only got his position because his father is some director. 32 years of life fueled entirely by nepotism, and a bastard who made Soo's existence miserable from day one at the company. John is there chewing him out, getting in his face, while the rest of the group tries to calm him down. Soo starts to get up, and the memories are slowly returning now. On the day of the accident, he really was tired behind the wheel. That's because this very same John had dumped all of his own workload onto Soo. Not to mention, Soo wasn't even supposed to be driving on this trip. The guy forced it on him. Everyone's screaming, trying to hold John back, and Soo's mind is rewinding to the original timeline. On this exact day in his past life, something similar happened. John hit him, and Soo, the old Soo, thought he was in the wrong and just kept apologizing. Hunched over, head bowed, sorry, sorry, sorry. And that's exactly how he went on living for the next 50 years, always apologizing, always lowering his head. Even when bandits robbed him, he apologized. When martial artists humiliated him, he apologized. His entire existence was one unbroken string of submission. But after years and years of a life like that, Soo began to realize something important. It's necessary to control your behavior around people you can't handle. That's just survival. However, there are different situations, and John Mayang-hoon is not someone Soo can't handle. Soo calls out to Chief John, says he knows he's angry, but now isn't the time to be pointing fingers at each other. John's response? He comes forward with another punch and a lovely comment about Soo's mother. The fist lands clean on Soo's cheek. I thought our boy was going to defend himself. Hold on. He's giving him that look, that stare. Soo-Yun Ryong says he will never have to kneel before someone he can actually handle. And he cracks John right across the face. Everyone's mouth drops open. Soo moves forward, landing another hit, and the memories are flooding in now. In his past life, he was beaten by countless martial artists. An uncountable number of times. He lands another direct hit and remembers the bandits. They were way more aggressive than this clown. He used to get thrashed just for gathering herbs on the mountain. Same thing when he didn't pay his taxes. 50 years of absorbing violence from people who were genuinely dangerous. And now there he is, beating the living hell out of the corporate nepotism kid. In this violent world, Soo had managed to gain something that these people at this moment did not have. He knew exactly how the human mind worked. The moment you land a punch right in the eye, fear is amplified. After taking a few more hits, only 2 words instinctively leave the mouth. Right then, John, trembling all over, voice cracking, utters the famous line, "I'm sorry." Soo-Yun Ryong might not have the mythical talents that those sages from the heavens seek. He might not have the martial prowess necessary to become famous in this world. But he did have the ability to change his destiny, and it starts with making this fool apologize. John is on the ground with his hands covering his head, completely subdued. The others are calling out to Soo, telling him to calm down. How could he beat up his coworker like that? Our boy immediately plays the normal person card, says he accidentally lost his head for a second, offers a sort of apology. Manager Kim, the voice of reason, says there's no point apologizing to them. John might have crossed a line, but Soo went way too far pummeling the guy like that. Soo knows the truth. Of all the people in this group, the only one who will truly stick with him is Director Kim. This man is about to become one of the strongest martial artists in the world once he starts learning, so Soo has to support this guy and stay close. Obviously, that's all just his plan for now. He walks over to John and apologizes again, says he really did overreact. John looks like he wants to say something, maybe curse him out, maybe throw another punch. But one little glare from Soo and the guy turns away, practically crapping his pants. Kim takes a look at the surrounding forest and says they need to get out of here, find a village or something, and Soo knows that's the logical thing to do. However, it's a shame that logic doesn't work in this world. This is the world of immortals, where everyone is trying to secure their own immortality. And the only rule is that the strong devour the weak. Anyone with a sword in hand will fight for fame and honor. The name of this forest is the Path of Ascension, and unfortunately there is no nation, no village, nothing nearby. Soo calls out to Kim and says the sun will be setting soon, so maybe they should make camp in a safe place. Kim agrees, but wants to know about the car, the one that was full of supplies. If they could find that, they could survive easily. Soo already knows the car will never be found under any circumstances. But the problem is, These people won't believe him if he just says that. He can't exactly explain that he knows this from a previous life, so he comes up with a plan. He says the best idea is to split up. One team searches for the car while the other sets up camp. That way they cover both bases. It's a logical decision, so everyone agrees. Night falls. Obviously, the car was never found. They built a campfire near a cave that Sue had conveniently located. The blue-eyed girl, whose name Sue still doesn't know, wants to know where the car ended up. They were in a landslide, so where did it go? Kim and the others say nobody has a clue. She's asking the wrong people. Everyone is lost. The group is eating some chestnuts they found, which are actually pretty tasty. Sue mentions he found more on the way, so they don't need to worry about food for now. Kim praises him, saying the situation is really difficult, but thanks to Sue, things aren't getting too complicated. Ever since the company, he always knew Sue was someone they could count on, and now he remembers the boy was probably exhausted since John had dumped all his work on him. The other girl, the one with yellow eyes, says that the manager has indeed always been very diligent. The little devils are all laying it on thick, right? Complimenting him, saying nice things. It's a shame Sue already knows these people are all going to abandon him. In his past life, he only found this cave after hours and hours of walking in the dead of night. This time, he walks straight to it. But he keeps that to himself and says it was just luck. Because he has to take advantage of this short moment, this is the last night they'll be able to laugh together like this. A short time later, under the moonlight, Sue is trembling as he stands before the Lord of the Forest. A three-tailed fox, massive and ancient, stares down at him. She says this boy has a very strange smell for a human. She has lived for over 1,000 years and has never encountered anything like it. The people from the cave stumble outside and nearly lose their minds when they see the creature. In his memory, Sue knows what to do. He tells everyone to kneel immediately and show respect to the Lord of the Forest. The fox says that every time she meets a human, it reminds her why they are idiotic and rude. She would have already torn off everyone's limbs. But it seems one of them knew how to respect the forest, and for that, they would be forgiven. However, they were in the territory of the Lord, and there's a price for that. One of them would have to offer an arm. That's the deal. Sue remembers what happened in his past life. Nobody knew what to do when the fox appeared. People started screaming in desperation. And the fox, without mercy, took all of everyone's limbs, left them half dead. Damn. At least this time the fox seems to appreciate the way Sue acted with respect. The creature licks her lips and wants to know who's giving up the arm. Sue had already seen everyone lose their limbs in his first life. Compared to that, a single arm from one person is a small price. Besides, those sages would arrive eventually and heal everyone. That's how they survived last time. And knowing this encounter was coming, Sue had even prepared an herb that helps reduce the pain. With sheer guts, he steps forward and says he'll offer his arm. Everyone is startled. The fox doesn't hesitate for a single second. She goes straight in, takes a big bite, and rips the boy's arm clean off. Everyone around him feels the horror of that moment. Sue immediately grabs the herb and eats it to dull the pain. The fox, chewing thoughtfully, says she thought the taste would be different because of his strange smell, but he was really identical to any other human. In fact, it was even worse. He seemed to have very impure veins. Sue, completely wrecked, blood everywhere, apologizes for the offering not being good enough. The fox turns and says she'll let them stay for 7 days in her territory. No one will die thanks to her divinity in this forest. And with that, she leaves. The rest of the group rushes over, calling his name, asking if he's okay. He says he is and asks for help getting to the cave. Since he was the first to encounter the fox, he says he spoke with her before the others arrived and learned some things about this world. He tells them the truth, they are no longer on Earth. Everyone is scared. They never imagined something like this could happen. But considering they just saw a three-tailed fox that's over 1,000 years old, reality is starting to sink in. Sue shows his missing arm and explains that at least they're safe for a week because of what he sacrificed. The others want to know what happens after that week. He says they'll probably have to give up something else. Everyone panics, but Sue just says he's exhausted and needs to rest. He hopes they understand. Night falls again, and apparently John has been talking, because now it sounds like most of the group is turning against Sue. The protagonist is listening from the shadows, as John asks who's going to be the one giving up their arm and leg in a week. The guy in the Adidas tracksuit argues that even so, they can't just throw Sue away. He was the one who found this place. He gave up his own arm for everyone. But John, that scheming weasel, says they should make the most of Sue while he's useful and then discard him. He's already down an arm. He won't last long anyway. For now, John is making his little plans. But our boy is sitting over there, one arm gone, quietly cultivating aura with his remaining hand in his pocket. And from what he's hearing, these lovely co-workers want to imprison him and offer his limbs to the fox every week. A human sacrifice farm run by corporate middle management. Sue picks up a big rock. He wasn't too thrilled about what he just heard. With the violence he learned over 50 years, it would be easy to finish off John even without an arm. The guy is right there, back turned, running his mouth while Sue holds the rock and weighs whether or not to bash this man's skull in. He takes a deep breath, drops the rock, says to himself, "Not for now. Fear must be influencing everyone's judgment right now." And if he's too cruel this early, it'll complicate the future relationships he needs to build, especially the one with director Kim. And that's when he hears it. Someone telling John to shut up or they'll break his legs. Soo realizes that even with John scheming, there were still people on his side. For now, that's enough. Night falls and another day arrives. Unlike the fox who demanded an entire arm, the two-headed snake that shows up only asks for a little blood. Now, this same snake in Soo's past life sucked their blood dry even though the poor souls had no limbs left at that point. No feet, no arms, just torsos getting drained. Absolutely horrific. But this time, things go a little differently. Chief Ogai offers up his arm for a taste. The snake takes one quick sip, makes a face if snakes can even make faces, and leaves. Just turns around and slithers off. Didn't want any more. Soo knows exactly why. That man's blood is absolutely marinated in alcohol and nicotine, topped off with a lovely layer of cholesterol. The snake literally tasted this man's lifestyle choices and decided it would rather go hungry. Can't blame the creature, honestly. With that settled, Soo tells John Ming to come with him to get some herbs. Now, calling the guy by his full name is kind of disrespectful in this culture, but Soo doesn't really care at this point. He just asks, "Are you hungry or not?" The guy says yes, so Soo tells him to come on. He's going to show him which herbs in this forest are edible and which ones will kill you. Here's where the clever bastard starts playing his cards. Soo casually mentions that he's already planning to give his arm to the fox again next week. So, if he dies from that, he needs someone who knows which herbs are safe. John Ming is all awkward about it, right? Because this is exactly his own plan: keep Soo useful, milk his knowledge, then discard him when the time comes. So John says it's good to know these things and thanks him for sharing. But Soo knows the truth. The fox isn't coming back, and this idiot won't have any chance to use this information against him. Next scene, and it's beautiful. Soo is absolutely chewing John out in the forest. How many times does he have to tell this fool not to pick the wrong herb? John is stammering out apologies. I'm sorry. And Soo says it seems like he's trying to kill everyone with his incompetence. He keeps berating the guy, taking full advantage of the passive aggression he built up over 50 years. You see, in his past life, Soo was the one getting chewed out by everyone, for everything. Now the roles have reversed and he's savoring every second. John tries to explain that he needs a break. He's been digging for these herbs non-stop. But Soo knows this man did everything he could to punish him from the very first day at the company. Dumped work on him, took credit for his efforts, treated him like garbage. So he just tells John to get back to work. They have to finish before the sun sets. A while later, John pulls something massive out of the ground, a giant root in his hand. He asks if this thing is really normal, and Soo plays dumb. Soo says it seems so. But obviously the guys have no idea that what John just found is actually a yellow bamboo root. Maybe it's because they're in the Forest of Ascension that it's grown to this size. These things are supercharged with spiritual energy here. Normally, a yellow bamboo root grows to the size of a little finger. However, in a place like this, things are different. The root isn't very useful for those who depend on spiritual energy, but for those who rely on physical strength, perfect. It's basically a power-up for the body. Seeing that the harvest is going well, John gets excited and wants to know how much more they'll find. Soo just keeps them working. Then, a while later, Soo looks toward the horizon and knows the time has come. A bright explosion tears across the sky. John falls face first into the ground. Everyone is scrambling, hands on their heads, screaming. What's going on? And from the sky, figures descend. Multiple powerful beings already arguing with each other before they've even landed. One of them in a yellow robe tells the other to disappear because the talented humans below belong to him. The one behind him, Byoko, fires back, saying they're his claim. Kim wants to know who these people are and what the hell is happening. The one in a black robe calmly examines the group and comments that only 3 of them have spiritual roots. The rest seem like normal mortals. He extends his hand, forms a golden ball of energy, and throws it directly at John. An old sage appears, absolutely thrilled, saying the boy really does possess the power of the golden thunder. Then the one who looks like a woman with black lipstick, and honestly, Soo can't tell if it's a he or a she, steps forward. This one called Yuno says it's their turn and plays a little tune. The moment the sound reaches the blue-eyed girl, she starts writhing in agony, screaming desperately. The cultivator celebrates, saying they've found a perfect immortal root. The muscular one puts his hand on Chief Ogai's shoulder and says the man has a sacred body. He'll be taken as a disciple of Azura. The chief is clearly terrified, not knowing how to respond while feeling the crushing pressure of this being's hand. But the black lipstick cultivator argues that maybe Chief O would be better suited for the Valley of Ghosts, a perfect place to seek immortality and dominate the heavens. They're all fighting over who gets to keep the guy, like kids arguing over the last slice of pizza, except the pizza is a human being. Kim is standing off to the side, completely confused by everything that's happening. Then suddenly, the cultivator in the golden robe loses patience with the bickering. He pulls out a small pot, opens it, and sucks John right inside. Just like that. Gone, absorbed into a tiny container. The cultivator says humans are too indecisive, and he'll be taking this one to the path of ascension, whether he likes it or not. The muscular one notices that Sue is missing an arm and comments that he's very brave for a regular mortal. Might just be an ordinary human, but he's really quite a boy. Sue thanks him politely, but at this point the cultivators are already leaving. They say their work here is done. Everyone should take advantage of the fact that this forest will be safe for the next 10 years since they passed through. Kim, desperate, tries to call out. They need help. They don't even know how to get out of this place. But the cultivators are already gone, disappeared into the sky without a second thought. Sue knows from his first life that shouting after them is pointless. He did that before, screamed and was ignored like an insect, so it's not even worth the effort. At least, just like in the past, everyone's bodies are restored. The healing energy left behind by the sages does its work. Sue looks down at his shoulder and watches as his arm grows back. Small victories. Kim, however, is still worried. He wants to know what they're going to do to survive in this forest. Strangely, a bunch of stars in the sky seems to be heading in a certain direction, and he wonders why that is. Sue doesn't comment on it. He knows what's coming next. The next day, inside the cave, the girl in pink clothes is suffering badly, spitting blood. The other girl, the one in green clothes, is panicking. And at this point, I've already realized these girls must not be important because we still don't know their names. The green-clothed girl says her friend isn't doing well. What do? Sue, playing it cool, just suggests they wait a little longer. What if someone shows up to heal her? That would be a huge coincidence, right? The group finds the suggestion a bit strange. But right on cue, someone enters the cave. A man steps through the entrance and says that watching them suffer in this place is like watching ants trying to defeat a dragon. Kim asks who he is. The man introduces himself as the Sea Dragon King, he says something about controlling storms and explains that he saw strange weather rain pouring specifically in this area and came to investigate. Turns out, the girl lying on the ground was somehow manipulating the weather unconsciously, using some kind of magic she didn't even know she had. The Sea Dragon King finds this fascinating. She looks like a normal woman. How could she possess such power? And she wasn't even consciously doing it, which made it even stranger. Sue tells the man that they're the ones who are confused. They arrived in this place not long ago, and powerful people like him keep showing up and taking his companions one by one. Who laughs at this, and says it seems his colleagues had already been here, and recognized potential in the group. It's almost ironic that now, conveniently, he has also appeared in front of this woman. Then he asks if the mortal understands where they are. This place is known as the Path of Ascension, the perfect passage to the upper world. In a few months, a gate of ascension is going to open here. This is something that happens once every 1,000 years. And because of that, countless creatures, cultivators, and powerful beings from all over gather in this place to try to pass through the gate. That's why so many strange and terrifyingly powerful people keep appearing in this forest. Sue says he understands. Kim, however, wants to know why the rest of their colleagues were taken into those strange objects. Who explains that it's difficult for a mortal to comprehend, but for people in this world, it's common to possess magic that can increase or decrease the size of things. The guys who took his friends probably have their entire sects and groups stored inside small objects. Their plan is to cross the gate of ascension carrying everything inside these items. Just like Hu's own castle, which is stored away inside an object. Inside it, more than 8,800 dragons are sleeping. Whether that means actual dragon creatures or members of his dragon clan, hard to say. He then declares that the girl is very peculiar. If she joined his group, she would have the chance to become something extraordinary. Kim tries to intervene, says they can't just take the girl like that. But Hu doesn't even blink. He just looks at Kim, and suddenly the director falls to his knees. His eyes are practically popping out of his head. The pressure is crushing him from the inside. Hu says calmly that he will give his blood to the girl and accept her as part of his group. This is the best solution for everyone. Furthermore, he advises them to never get in the way of the intentions of people in this world. Kim's head is about to explode, and our poor protagonist got caught in the crossfire of the pressure wave too. Hu says he is being merciful. Most people at his level would have simply killed them. With a massive thunderclap, the Sea Dragon King flies off on a dragon, stylish as hell. The next day, almost everyone has been kidnapped by various cultivators. Only one girl remains, and we still don't know her name. She's sitting there laughing like a maniac. What a mess. This world with its dragon business. Colleagues being taken away. People flying. What the hell is this? Honestly, that would probably be my exact same reaction if I were in her shoes. Sue gently pats her on the shoulder, tells her to calm down. She, however, just begs him not to be taken away too. She wouldn't be able to survive in this forest alone. Sue just thinks to himself it's a shame, but their time is up. Suddenly, the girl starts screaming in agony, puts her hands on her head, says something is coming, Kim runs to help, but she says it's too late. Whatever it is has already arrived. Out of nowhere, an old man riding a mechanical Oni lion drops from the sky. Good lord, that thing looks like it was pulled straight out of some steampunk nightmare. A mechanical lion with an Oni face, carrying a hunchbacked old man, and the old guy wants to know how mortals ended up on this path. He comes to his own conclusion: the space is unstable because of the upcoming gate opening. That must be how they were pulled in. Now he wants to know who emitted that vast consciousness. He felt a presence as if one of the sages from the upper realms had descended to Earth, and he believes it's the girl. The old man asks Kim to stay where he is. Kim tries to warn him that she's their colleague, but the old man just gives him one look and oh, here we go again. Director Kim gets blasted, the poor man. Every single powerful being that shows up beats the hell out of him. It's a good thing Sue cushioned the impact so the guy wouldn't die outright, but his ribs got torn up from the shockwave. The old man, not even remotely concerned about the damage he just caused, walks over to the girl, takes her face in his hands, and says the child will be coming with him. She might not have a good foundation, but with the talent she possessed for consciousness, he can awaken her power. She's crying, calling out for Sue and Kim. But the old man says it's best for her to abandon her connections to this world, especially now that he has made this offer. They start to fly away, and apparently the old man is planning to kill Sue and Kim to force the girl to fully accept. She screams that she'll accept if he doesn't kill them. Better that way. The old man agrees, says it's good for her to forget all her worldly connections. She says fine. He lets the two of them go, but then suddenly he turns and aims back in their direction, saying that if he leaves them alive, she'll remain connected forever. For a terrifying second, it looks like he'll attack, but instead he opens a portal and sends them to a nearby city. That's actually kinda humble, honestly. The other cultivators who showed up didn't do that much. Some of them just sucked people into objects without any courtesy at all. At least this old man gave them a way out. Through the old man's ring, as they're pulled through the portal, they can faintly hear the girl calling for them one last time. But she's gone. Goodbye. Sue and Kim wake up in the middle of a dusty alley. The sounds of a bustling marketplace surround them. People selling scriptures, selling cloth, shouting prices. A place called Yangok. Sue opens his eyes, shielding them from the sun, and tries to figure out where exactly he is. In his past life, he didn't land in this particular spot, so at first, he's disoriented. The old man apparently told the truth, he just threw them into a random location. However, as Sue looks around, something about this place feels familiar. He squints against the sunlight, studies the buildings, the streets, the patterns of the crowd. Then recognition hits him. He knows this place. He lived here for a while in his first life. This is the famous capital of Wong, the city of Sukim. Now let me take stock of what our boy actually has going for him at this point. No powers, no spiritual root, no martial talent of any kind. The only advantage he carries from 50 years of living is knowledge, the language, the geography, the culture, how to survive, and the ability to regress. That's it. This is literally a competition of the gifted against the one guy who goes back in time with nothing but soap recipes and trauma. A short time later, they're still in the alley talking. The old man, Director Kim, says he can't take it anymore. This is insanity. Sue says he feels the same way, wishes he could wake up and find out it was all a dream. Kim scratches his balding head and says at least maybe they should feel relieved that they weren't taken by those monsters. Just the two of them left, but at least they're free. Sue, however, doesn't feel the same way. He may have gone back to the past, but he remembers where this path leads. Following this exact trajectory in his first life, he was nothing more than an herb collector who got beaten up every single day. That's the future waiting for him if nothing changes. He says that whatever happens, they can't just stand still in this alley forever. At the very least, they need to get moving. The city is vast, and Kim can't understand a single word anyone around them is saying. People in the marketplace are staring at them and commenting Kim has no idea what about, but it's clearly about them. Sue tells him they're commenting on their clothes. They look funny compared to what everyone else is wearing. Kim is confused because everyone around seems to be speaking Chinese, but the two of them are Korean. Sue says he learned Chinese when he was younger, but the truth is, the bastard is lying. It's not even Chinese they're speaking here. The symbols look kinda similar, but the sounds are completely different. A different language entirely. In his past life, Sue spent 2 solid months being chewed out by beggars on the street, just to start understanding basic conversations. However, after all those decades of living here, the language is second nature now. There's no reason to worry about communication. Kim, however, looking at Sue's torn up, bloody back, is more concerned about that than the fact that the kid apparently speaks 2 languages. He tells Sue to take care of that wound before it gets infected. Sue says the first order of business is getting new clothes, but Kim is already stressing how are they going to manage anything. They have no money. They can't communicate properly. They're 2 Korean men in ancient-looking Chinese robes standing in an alley looking like they just survived a war. However, the clever devil already has a plan. Sue walks into an herb shop and slams that massive yellow bamboo root onto the counter. The old shopkeeper's eyes go wide. Sue immediately tells the man that this root is over 800 years old, and he'd better pay a good price for it. The shopkeeper is stunned. he offers 15 silver ingots. 15 silver ingots? That's serious bars. That seems like a lot of money for this world. Even Su is surprised in his past life he never managed to accumulate this much wealth. You'd think he'd try to negotiate, right? Show that he knows the market value. Maybe haggle for 20. But the truth is, Su-Yun Ryong was a desperately broke beggar in his first life. He has absolutely zero concept of what constitutes good negotiation here. So he just takes the 15 and walks out. A short time later, they're already set up in a big house that Su rented, and he tells director Kim that he's going to teach him the language of this place. It seems like everything worked out smoothly and quickly. However, that's just the power of money. The problem is between renting this house, getting fake identification plates for both of them, and buying new clothes, he spent almost everything. He's got 1 silver ingot left. Kim notices that Su's back is still bloody, tells the boy to go take care of it. It's going to get infected, and he'll have to reincarnate all over again. At this, Kim says he's going to stop calling him boy or manager, and that from now on, he'll be Su-Yun. A little later, Su explains the financial situation. The reason they have money at all is because of those herbs from the forest. The problem is, when the herbs run out, the income stops. So the first and most important thing is finding a way to earn money consistently. Director Kim already has an idea they can sell the remaining herbs, save up a cushion of money, and start a business. The man used to manage a relatively large company back on Earth, so strategy and business planning are in his blood. It's not a bad approach. It'll keep them alive. But just surviving is no longer enough for Su-Yun Ryong. He went back in time, and in this life, he's going to dream big. Here's what Su understands better than anyone alive. Director Kim is a martial genius who, in his first life, the man bought a cheap random book off the street and mastered it in 3 months. A short time after that, he got his hands on more advanced techniques and became one of the greatest martial masters in the entire world. The man went from 0 to legendary off a bargain bin manual and some determination. Now Su's thinking, what if Kim didn't start with the cheap stuff? What if he learned the advanced techniques right from the beginning? Maybe Su could anticipate the birth of the most powerful swordsman this world has ever seen by at least 30 years. And obviously being close to that kind of power has its benefits. If Kim becomes unstoppable and Su is the one who put him on that path, then Su benefits to the absolute maximum. Su calls for the director and brings up a topic casually. He says he's been noticing that in this world, this thing called martial arts seems very relevant. Considering that if they start any kind of business and have any success, they'll probably need to know how to defend themselves. Can't run a shop if bandits kick your door in every other week. Director Kim says he's heard of martial arts before, but as far as he knows, they're only taught to people who belong to a sect, so how are they going to learn? Su notes with quiet satisfaction that the man already knows a bit about the martial world. He's not completely lost. Su then explains that in this city, there are 7 famous sects. First, the Demon Slayer sect, which specializes in sword and blade techniques. Then there's the Blinding sect, the Buddhist temple, which fights with those Karate Kid-style moves. The House sect, which is full of scholars and smart fighters. The sect of 7 mysteries. And then 3 demonic sects that nobody really knows much about, other than the fact that they have proficiency in witchcraft and obviously do a lot of illegal things. Su asks Kim which one he likes the most. The answer comes instantly: the Demon Slayer sect. A true master in a place like this has to use a sword and learn blade techniques. Su can barely contain his smile. He didn't even need to convince the guy. This is the exact same path Kim chose in his first life. The man gravitates toward swords like it's written in his DNA. Kim wants to know, though how does Su already know all this information? About the sects, about the city? Our boy plays it off. Says that when he was negotiating for the fake identities, he overheard some guys talking about the local martial world. Perfectly reasonable explanation. Kim buys it. And with that, our first time skip happens. 3 months later, they're standing in front of the Demon Slayer sect's gates. The guards ask what they're doing there. Su, standing to the left, says he brought his older brother who's interested in learning martial arts. The guards, a couple of guys who look like they belong in a Rockin' Goku outfit, don't seem very excited about this. However, they notice the quality of Su and Kim's clothes and recognize that these guys probably have good money, and the sect is in need of funding. Even so, one of the guards apologizes and says that learning martial arts at Kim's age would be almost impossible. Su insists, asking to at least see someone from the higher ranks. And while he's talking, he's already slipping the guard a coin. Money opens doors in any universe. A while later, they're inside the sect, sitting across from a higher-ranked member. The man asks if they really just want to learn martial arts for self-defense. Su has brought an entire feast of silver ingots and places them on the table. Says yes, that's all they want. The moment the old man sees the money, the tune changes completely. He says it's all right, they can become external disciples. However, 2 conditions. First, there's no special treatment for those who enter through donations. Second, they can only accept one of the 2. Kim is about to complain about this limitation, but Su jumps in and accepts immediately. says it's perfect for them. The old man is already walking away, telling them to just come find him when they're ready to join the other disciples. Kim turns to Sue and asks if it's really okay for only him to learn. He would have chosen a different group if he'd known it would cost this much. Sue tells him not to worry. He was never very good at sports either. While Kim learns martial arts, Sue will handle the business side of their survival. Kim thanks him and says honestly he doesn't know if he'll really be able to learn much at his age. Sue tells him to trust himself. Try it before judging. Another time skip, 7 months later. The annual competition within the sect. The man sitting on the elevated throne wants to know where this particular disciple came from, because Director Kim has just annihilated every single person in the competition. Crushed disciples, who've been training in this sect for years, made all of them look like they've never held a sword. See, mastering a martial art means understanding its true meaning and aligning your body with the technique. Someone with limited knowledge becomes a third-rate warrior at best. To advance beyond that point, you need more and more knowledge, which really just means more time and more effort. The other disciples attack Kim, shouting that he's an outsider who will never beat them. But obviously more knowledge means more investment. And certain people are simply born with enough raw talent to laugh in the face of all that accumulated knowledge. They can advance through numerous stages at once, skipping what takes others decades. The Demon Slayer sect is already famous for producing members like that geniuses who surpass the norm. But for the first time ever, an outsider appeared and made every single one of those so-called great disciples look pathetic. In just 7 months, Director Kim became a first-rate warrior who had mastered absolutely all the techniques of the Demon Slayer sect, every single one. The elder is beside himself. He doesn't understand how this is possible. To force someone's evolution that quickly, you'd need to gather countless martial artists to support a single person through intensive, round-the-clock training. When this man is an outsider with zero prior martial arts experience, it was as if the very tradition and history of the sect crumbled before him. The order comes down, capture him. They're convinced he's a spy. And there's our boy Sue. He already imagined this would create a problem. An outsider dominating a prestigious sect in 7 months? That's going to leave everything in chaos. What he doesn't understand, though, is why he's also been imprisoned. He knows absolutely nothing about martial arts. But here he is, locked in a cell with the most dangerous man in the building. Sue asks Kim if he's not worried. A lot of people suspect he's a spy. Normally in these kinds of stories, the sect destroys your martial arts, cuts off an arm, or does something permanent to prevent you from ever fighting again. Kim, however, replies calmly that he already knows about those risks. But for some reason, he feels that continuing to practice is the only way to get past the next barrier. Deep inside, he already knows that if he pushes through, he'll advance to the next stage. Sue understands how incredible this is. Being a first-rate warrior was already impressive on its own, but advancing beyond that, that's something only the masters of the sect can achieve. That level has at most 1,000 people in the entire world. And after that, the only thing left is the absolute peak where you're basically untouchable. Sue is now certain this guy is going to reach the very top. Not 30 years earlier than he originally planned, more like 40 years faster. 7 days later, there's Director Kim in the cell with little flowers floating around him, energy being absorbed into his body. Sue already knows this phenomenon only appears in martial artists nearing the peak. Kim stands up and announces that he has crossed the barrier. He's no longer afraid of the sect leader. Sue praises him, says his talent exceeds what he expected. Kim says he's also genuinely surprised at himself. He didn't imagine he had this kind of ability. Maybe it was because when he was a child back on Earth, he read countless martial arts stories. All those years of reading about swordsmen and warriors, maybe it planted something deeper than he realized. But right at that moment, some guys rush into the cell area announcing that the time has come. The sect has received orders from the leader to destroy Kim's energy core. They're now certain he's a member of the demonic sect, a spy sent to infiltrate and destroy them from within. Kim gives the men a look. Sue, always the diplomat, tries to calm everyone down, says he's already told them multiple times no one here is a spy. The guard just tells him to shut up and punches him in the face. Warns that he's heard them talking in their coded language meaning Korean, and he's absolutely sure they're not from around here. However, Kim has already drawn his sword, once, and the guard's weapon clatters to the floor. The cut was so precise that he didn't actually sever the man's hand, he just disarmed him perfectly. Not a scratch on the skin, but the sword is gone. The bald man warns them this is his first sect. He's trying to be polite about this. The Raken Goku guard charges with his own sword, but in a matter of seconds, every single one of the guards has received the same precise little tap on the hand. Their swords clatter to the ground one after another. Kim didn't injure any of them. Just showed them the gap in skill was so astronomical that they're essentially children trying to arm wrestle a mountain. Everyone starts running desperately down the corridors, shouting that this outsider has somehow reached the peak of martial arts. The peak in 7 months. Kim calls out to Sue and says he's going to leave this sect and travel to others to train. He wants to know what Sue plans to do. Sue, not being a fool, says he's coming along. They could head to the unorthodox dragon sect next, for example. Kim says he'll meet him there. And in the very next scene, Kim is already standing at the top of a mountain. His sword is dripping with blood. He asks why Soo took so long to catch up. Soo laughs and says, yeah, the director is a little faster than him. Looking at that blood-soaked blade, Soo notices something. Kim was never a violent person. Not on Earth. This man managed companies and read novels, and probably enjoyed a quiet cup of tea. But this world has already started changing him. He used that sword without hesitation. Soo knows that if Kim could choose, he'd return to the peaceful life on Earth in a heartbeat. He's tired of the violence in this world. However, none of that matters anymore. They're here now, and he'll do whatever is necessary to survive. After being betrayed by the first sect, they invaded the dragon's house and took over everything there. 2 years later, they ventured into the Manga region and continued defeating sect after sect. And it was in the 3rd year that every emblem from every sect in the region had been cut down by Kim. Before long, he was given the title of the strongest martial artist under the heavens. And he used that fame to unite the sects and form an alliance. 7 years later, man, we're moving along here. Soo and director Kim had become the closest of brothers. The age difference between them meant nothing. They ignored it entirely, and Kim even managed to work on a specific martial art designed just for Soo. He hands him the book and says the name of the technique is the Mountain Cutter. He created it with Soo's specific talent or lack thereof in mind. He's sure Soo can reach the peak with this. Soo is genuinely impressed. The technique is really above anything else he's ever seen. The structure, the philosophy, the movements all tailored to someone like him. The only problem is the expected one. He had absolutely no talent. Think about this. He was learning from the most powerful martial artist under the heavens, using a technique crafted specifically and exclusively for him and no one else. And even after a whole year of practicing, Soo barely managed to become a third-rate warrior, the bottom of the barrel, the absolute minimum. Soo says that maybe there's just no way. His talent lies in medicine, not in fighting, and apparently that's the life he's meant to lead. Each person has talents in different areas. Some people are born to hold a sword. Soo was born to make soap. And with that acceptance weighing on him, time marches forward. On the first day after a decade had passed, Soo witnessed the level he had only ever heard about in legends. The 5 energies of the world converging into a single person, Director Kim. The old man starts having a fit. His body contorts, his muscles shift and expand. His hair, that balding patchy hair Soo has known for years, suddenly grows long and turns jet black. Soo rushes over, calling the old guy's name. And standing before him is a completely different person. Kim is young now, handsome, long flowing hair, muscular build radiating power. This was the so-called skeletal reconstruction, a process that creates an entirely new body from within. Soo, looking at this man who now appears decades younger than him, comments that Kim is looking younger than he is. Kim responds that he really does feel full of life, like he could do anything, like the entire world is within his reach. Soo congratulates him, says the world is going to be terrified of this skeletal reconstruction. But Kim, standing tall, says he'll have to pass on the succession of the martial alliance to someone else soon. He's moving on. Soo wants to know who he's thinking of passing it to. Kim says there are some talented people in the alliance, but no one really understood the true essence of martial arts. Not at a deep enough level. Soo tells him straight, Kim is the only person extraordinary enough to know what the essence of martial arts truly is. If he's expecting to find another genius like himself, he's going to be waiting a very long time. Kim, looking out the window at the world below, says that even when he tries to lower his expectations, there was still no one worthy. And we jump forward another 15 years. It's now been 35 years since Soo began his life on the path of ascension. He's 65 years old. Kim passed on the leadership position a year after the skeletal reconstruction and left to travel the world. Soo wanted to retire with his friend, but someone had to stay behind and manage the strategic side of the alliance. Kim said he'd like to explore more of this world. Maybe that's why he couldn't make it to Soo's retirement ceremony. Soo is walking through a beautiful garden, a mansion he bought with his retirement money. The place is gorgeous, expansive grounds, manicured paths, quiet ponds. The only downside is that it's way too big, and he's completely alone in it. He comments to himself that this place is too silent. Then he spots someone lying in the middle of the bushes. When he takes a closer look, it's Kim, still with the long hair that Soo can't get used to. Soo wants to know where he's been. Why is he only showing up now? Kim, however, just falls back onto the grass and calls out Soo's name. And then he says something that makes Soo stop in his tracks. Kim tells him that he always believed he was blessed in martial arts. Soo says of course he is. If Kim isn't a genius, who the hell would be? Kim agrees in this world of common mortals, he really was extraordinary. The protagonist laughs. Of course he wasn't ordinary. The man could do in months what others couldn't achieve in decades. But then Kim's voice drops. He says he fought against a true practitioner, one of those beings from 35 years ago, the ones who flew down from the heavens and took their friends. Soo knows that these cultivators don't reveal themselves easily. They're like shadows that control the entire world from the darkness. And as the martial alliance they built gained more and more power, these cultivators started wanting to influence them. No one could oppose them. Going against a cultivator was like going against the nation itself. Any rule handed down by them was obeyed without question. That's exactly why Kim left the alliance. He wanted to fight these guys as an individual, not as a leader, because his actions as master could bring consequences down on everyone in the organization. Kim says they were extremely difficult to find. Most cultivators ignored him completely, told him he wasn't worthy of a fight. They'd vanish, use illusions, refuse to engage. For years, Kim hunted them and came up empty. However, 5 years ago, he finally got a duel. Sue asks if he won. Kim says he did. The protagonist praises him, relieved that Kim wasn't still the alliance leader when he pulled something like this. Otherwise, the entire organization would have paid the price. Then Kim explains what winning actually looked like. He put his entire life on the line in the fight against this cultivator. Everything he had, every technique, every ounce of power. And all he managed to do was a small cut on the tip of the cultivator's finger. The truth is, the cultivator had made a bet. If Kim could land even the slightest wound, he would technically be considered the winner. That was the only reason the duel was called in Kim's favor. Sue figures this cultivator must have been one of the top 10 strongest, some legendary figure near the pinnacle of their kind. However, that wasn't the case at all. This cultivator was actually at one of the weakest stages compared to his peers. In mortal terms, this guy was basically someone who just entered the second tier. Extremely basic. The bottom of the cultivator food chain? Sue says that's impossible. He already knew from his past life that cultivators were ridiculously powerful creatures, but Kim has reached the absolute pinnacle of humanity. The strongest martial artist under the heavens, a man who could deliver countless strikes while seeming to float through the air, untouchable by any mortal. When the absolute best he could do against a bottom-tier cultivator was nick the tip of his finger. Kim tells Sue that he's lived his whole life as a frog in a well. They don't stand a chance against these beings, walking natural disasters. Every single one of them. But then Kim adds something. Even so today, he managed to cut off one of their hands. Sue's eyes go wide. He asks excitedly if that means Kim actually won this time. Kim says no. The cultivator put a talisman on the stump, regenerated the hand instantly, and that was that. Like nothing happened. The problem is, Kim says, he's now realized he has reached the absolute limit of martial arts. There is nothing left to achieve on the mortal path. He's hit the ceiling. And today, he's here to say goodbye. Because when that cultivator saw Kim's willpower during their encounter, he offered to accept Kim into his sect. Kim would no longer be a martial artist. He would begin the path of immortality, the path of cultivation. Sue says that's impossible. To become a cultivator means to abandon mortality entirely, and that can only be done if a person possesses a spiritual root. You either have one or you don't, it's something you're born with. So how can Kim just switch paths? Kim explains. His skeletal transformation, that moment when his body reconstructed itself, was basically him training his entire life to reach the minimum baseline of talent that a cultivator is born with. Let that sink in. Someone as brilliant as Director Kim, the most gifted martial artist in the world, who needed to train for decades to reach the floor of what these cultivators possess from the moment they take their first breath. The starting line for a cultivator is the finish line for the greatest mortal who ever lived. Kim makes a cut in the void, a literal tear in space. A portal opens in front of him, and the crazy bastard starts walking through it, stepping onto what looks like another plane of existence entirely. He says he's going to leave one last gift for Sue. Before Sue can even respond, Kim has handed him a scroll and disappeared through the portal. The manuscript is a record of how to transcend martial arts and achieve cultivation through physical training, a roadmap for the impossible. Sue holds it in his hands and stares at the space where his friend used to be standing. He wanted to know where his friend was going, without him, without saying a proper goodbye. And with that, time passed once again. There he is, coughing, saying that this world is cruel. It's been 50 years since he arrived in this world, and here he is again dying from a random cold. Just like in his first life, on the exact same day. Destiny, it seemed, was something a human could not escape no matter how much they tried. In the end, the only things that changed between this life and the last one were the house and the clothes. But the death, identical. Same cold, same weakness, same lonely room. Sue tells himself he lived this life to the fullest. He didn't want to have any regrets like in his first life, so he kept himself as busy as humanly possible. Studied as much as he could, practiced as much as he could, never even bothered with marriage or normal things. Because of that relentless drive, he managed to unite every martial sect in the region. He achieved fame, wealth, everything the mortal world had to offer. So why at this moment does he feel this crushing emptiness? Could it be that if he and Kim had tried even harder, they would have reached the heavens? Unfortunately, his body will not find that answer. All he can feel is a deep, consuming sense of powerlessness. Truly, it was another life of disappointments. This marked the end of the second regression, and you remember the last chapter ended at the moment he died. But it's not surprising at this point when Sue wakes up in the same forest, the path of ascension. His body is full of energy, young again, fresh again, In other words, his regression wasn't just a one-life thing. This is going to keep happening. At that moment, that bastard with the brown hair shows up and slaps him. John Mayang Hoon right on schedule, calling him a son of a bitch. However, this time, Sue easily dodges. The guy is swinging wildly, trying to land something, anything, but Sue is just standing there, staring past him, thinking, why did I regress? I have a new body. I'm full of energy. Clearly, a new opportunity should be something good. But what happened to the things I built over the last 50 years? The alliance, the mansion, the relationship? John keeps cursing, saying he's a bastard who almost killed everyone and still has the nerve to dodge like that. Sue just keeps staring into the distance, wondering if this regression is really something good. And soon, he says no. In fact, this power he received is more of a curse, one that denies him the meaning of life. Of course, some regressions would be wonderful. He would be grateful for the opportunity. But what if he gets stuck in this forever, trapped in the wheel of fate, forced to suffer until the end of time? Living the same starting point over and over, building everything from nothing, watching everyone he loves become strangers again. Because that's the thing nobody talks about with regression. The people in front of him right now are completely different beings. They share the same appearance as the ones he knew, but they are not the same people. Even Kim, the man he considered his own brother, that version of Kim no longer exists. The Kim who trained for decades, who became the strongest under the heavens, who said goodbye through a portal, he's gone. The Kim standing in front of Sue now hasn't lived through any of those experiences, hasn't made any of those choices. He's a stranger, wearing a familiar face. Every bond Sue built over 50 years was erased the moment he woke up. Sue tells John to calm down, asks what getting angry is going to help. The guy is still screaming that Sue is a shameless bastard. But Sue simply reveals the truth. John was the one who should have been driving. He dumped his work onto Sue, forced him behind the wheel despite knowing he had barely slept. And besides, who could dodge an avalanche on a narrow road? It would be good for John to stop pointing fingers and start thinking about what they can actually do. John stands there, exhausted and panting, unable to argue a single point. Sue takes command of the group immediately, calls for Director Kim and says he'll look for a place to stay before the sun sets. Everyone else should go search for the car or find a way out of the forest. When it gets dark, he'll light a campfire. Everyone should head toward it. Night falls. The campfire is burning. Everyone is sleeping on the ground inside the cave. Sue is the only one awake, and now he's facing a new fear: eternal regression. Living the same opening act over and over, building from nothing each time, watching people he cares about forget him. Is there any escape from this cycle? He wonders if maybe, just maybe, there's a way to remove the regression ability entirely. Maybe it would disappear if he could return to Earth. Thinking about it, he always comes back to this exact moment: the path of ascension. Before the gate opens, there has to be a connection. He remembers the old man on the mechanical Oni lion saying that when the path of ascension gate opens, the surrounding space destabilizes. That's probably how they ordinary humans got pulled into this world, through a spatial variation. Maybe that same gate can work in reverse. Maybe it's his ticket home. But first, he needs power. As an ordinary human, he can't force anything to happen. He can't access the gate. He can't fight his way to it. He needs to become as powerful as Kim became in his past lives. A longer lifespan, more experience, enough strength to actually research and access the path of ascension. The goal crystallizes. Get stronger, access the gate, return to Earth, end the cycle. The next morning, Sue eats the same yellow bamboo root from before to strengthen his body. However, now that he has 2 lifetimes of knowledge about energy and how to extract it from plants, he can concentrate the root's power into his core, something that would have been impossible in his first life. He starts practicing the dragon vein technique, which was the technique Kim created for him in his second life. With it, he begins to break the energy blockages in his body. The only downside is that his body is still full of stress and toxins from his past life and the foods from Earth. After a while, he's working on a piece of wood, sanding it down, carving it into a spear shape. He starts practicing cuts and realizes immediately that he's worse than before. Makes sense: at the end of his last life, he was old and had stopped training. His physical skills have degraded significantly. However, a glance at a tree, a whip of the wooden weapon, and he makes a clean cut through the trunk. Even though his technique is rough, the knowledge is there. The muscle memory from 2 lifetimes is buried in his consciousness. Growing back into form is just a matter of time. Director Kim sees this happen and nearly falls over. He rushes over, wanting to know how Sue just did that. How did he make a cut with a twig and slice an entire tree? The man just came from Earth. He should have 0 ability to do something like that. But the damn bald man finds nothing suspicious. He's just impressed and excited. Sue gives him a curious look, thinking that the guy who will help him become powerful has finally arrived at his doorstep. He asks if Director Kim wants to learn. Kim says yes without a second thought. Buddy, you literally just watched a coworker slice a tree with a stick, and you're not even questioning how that's physically possible? But sure, let's learn martial arts from the soap guy. Fine. However, the scene shifts to the same familiar encounter. The fox approaches the clearing, saying that humans are disgusting and bold to be in her forest. Sue, who has lived so long that he genuinely forgot this creature would show up, faces her once again. In his first and second lives, all he could do was stand there and take the bite. Blood gushing, arm torn off. He blocked some pressure points to reduce bleeding and dull the pain, but there was really nothing he could do against a being this powerful. The others ask where Sue is going as he walks calmly toward the fox. In this third regression, he's still weak. In his second life, he swore he would reach the level of convergence of the 5 energies. However, even after what amounted to hundreds of years training alongside the most powerful martial artists in the world, he barely managed to reach the first level. The truth is that his martial talent is irrelevant compared to the people around him. Sue tears off his own arm and offers it. He says that no matter how he is, no matter how weak, and that even if it takes a millennium or 10,000 years, he will not give up. The fox licks her lips and says he's interesting, a human who knows his place and knows how to sacrifice himself. Since that was the case, she would try what he was offering. Sue stares at the space where his arm used to be, thinking I'll keep giving this arm until eventually the day comes when I am stronger than you. As always, after eating the arm, the fox leaves. And Sue, without caring about the rest of the team for a single second, throws himself into training in the forest. The only moment he stopped was when the cultivators arrived in the sky and took his remaining co-workers away, one by one. As soon as they were gone, he went straight back to practicing, without eating, without resting, non-stop for 4 consecutive days. On the 4th day, he finally stops. He presents himself before the Sea Dragon King Hu as an inferior mortal and says he has a question. The so-called Hu, the horned one, wants to know why a mortal is curious about anything at this level. Sue asks the girl who is taking had her spiritual root trapped, meaning she wouldn't be able to practice cultivation, and as a mere mortal, she would live for at most 100 years. So why was he taking her? Hu replies that the boy is too informed for a mortal, but he doesn't need to worry. When she accepts his blood, she will awaken a spiritual root and receive talents. At that moment, Sue gets excited. His pulse quickens. He asks if he could also receive an opportunity like that. They were all from the same lands. Maybe Sue has some kind of special power that Hu might be interested in. Maybe there's something hidden inside him too. Hu, however, just smiles, and suddenly Sue feels a sharp pain in his chest, the pressure of the Sea Dragon King's power bearing down on him. Hu tells him to listen carefully and to remember this so he can stay alive. He should never demand or ask anything from someone like him. Hu has lived for countless millennia and understands things that Sue can't even begin to comprehend. The only reason Sue is still breathing is that Hu happens to be one of the kinder beings at this level. Any other cultivator would have killed him simply for making eye contact. With that, Hu disappears in a crash of thunder, surfing away on his dragon. Meanwhile, poor director Kim is standing there not understanding a single thing that just happened since the entire conversation was in the local language. The next day, the last friend would be taken by the hunchbacked old man. But before he leaves, Sue asks a similar question. Kim Yum didn't have a spiritual root, so how could she become the old man's disciple? The old man shows a pill in his hand. He says this item allows anyone to reach their spiritual instincts. Even a mere mortal could have the opportunity to become powerful if they consume this. This is critical information for Sue. Now he knows for certain there's a path beyond simple martial arts practice to become more powerful. A shortcut exists in the form of these pills. The old man also drops one more piece of knowledge that sticks with Sue. He says it is possible for a mortal to train in martial arts and eventually gain the root of the 5 elements. However, this was an incredibly long path, and the result was quite mediocre. The truth is that what you gain from the pill is much better and much faster. He opens the portal for Sue and Kim and says that's enough. He has nothing to resolve with either of them and they should disappear. The girl shouts goodbye to both of them, but Sue opens his eyes at the top of a tree. From up high, he can see the southern side of the Yango region. Just like in his past life, it seems he and Kim will spend some time navigating this area. However, Sue has challenged countless people from all over this world across multiple lifetimes. He knows most of the terrain like the back of his hand. He wakes the director and takes him to the nearest city, explains the whole situation. Obviously, Kim is confused. A new world, a new language, strange powers, it's a lot. But little by little, he begins to accept reality. They arrive in the city of Robio where they sell the Ascension herbs. But this time, they only buy a small house. Sue teaches Kim the language of this world and gives him the mountain destruction technique, a martial art he created during his second regression by modifying an older technique, adjusting everything specifically to suit Kim's abilities. But here's the thing. After practicing just a little bit, Sue is already thinking about how demotivating this existence is. Kim reached the level of 3 flowers in 3 months of learning martial arts. 3 months. Meanwhile, Sue, who has practiced across 2 entire lifetimes, barely sits at the first level. It's not even close. The gap between them isn't a crack, it's the Grand Canyon. Kim stands up all excited and says he thinks he can beat Sue now. The protagonist smiles and thinks this is really not the same Kim he considered a brother in his past life. This version is mentally hundreds of times younger than him. The truth is, at this moment, Soo is almost like a great-great-grandfather to director Kim. The man in front of him is a kid compared to the Soo who has lived through entire civilizations. In this life, you won't be able to keep up with this guy. Soo knows that already. He hands over the remaining books and says that from this moment on, they will live separate lives. Kim is confused. Did he do something wrong? What's the reason for them to separate? Soo's reasoning is clear, even if he can't share all of it. In the first regression, Kim became the leader of the Martial Alliance and lost to the Cultivators in the end. And in the second regression, things weren't that different. Kim created more advanced techniques, practiced even more, and essentially reached the limit of martial arts. But he was unable to defeat cultivators with mortal power and ended up abandoning martial arts entirely to focus on cultivation. Soo knows the same thing will happen to Kim if they stay close his whole life. And to avoid seeing that face of despair again, the face of a genius realizing his genius isn't enough, Soo decides to walk alone. He tells Kim that in this life, he will travel the lands to improve his own skills. Kim, however, wants to know how Soo will live without him nearby. The protagonist says that the martial skills he's already taught should be more than enough for Kim to strengthen himself. He can already communicate, write, and fight. He's at the martial peak in terms of potential. He has nothing to worry about. Kim says he understands, but he didn't want to disconnect from the only person he knows from his homeland, the only link to Earth, to who they used to be. Soo says he understands too, and then makes a promise. Every 2 years, on this exact day, they would meet at this house. No matter what's happening in their lives, no matter where they are, they come back here. And with that, after convincing the director, Soo Yun Ryong left. Blue sky stretching overhead, a road leading to the unknown. A guy holding a spear tells Soo to stay right there and asks what brings him to the Hall of the Eight Respected. Soo says he came to request a duel. The guard bursts out laughing. Nobody just walks in here and calls for a duel like that. However, in that moment, Soo draws his sword. In the same second, the guard's spear tears apart, split clean in 2 pieces. Soo asks the man, does he look like just anyone? Soo Yun Ryong swears that in this life, he will do everything possible to become stronger. The protagonist is starting to accumulate that aura. In the first life, he went hungry. In the second life, went hungry again. In this third one, he'll probably go hungry once more. But at least this time, he's going to humiliate some people along the way. As they approach the hall, a young girl from Ho says that the leader is waiting for him. She leads Soo through a corridor, and they arrive in front of the boss. Everyone is standing around, staring. The old man on the elevated seat laughs and says he was wondering who the visitor was. Soo seemed to be a first-degree martial artist from the feel of his aura. He never imagined it would be a young man. Soo presents himself properly and pays his respects to the leaders of the hall. The guy says it really does seem like the boy has formidable power. It's the same for him. All he asks is for the boy to bless this inexperienced old man with some teachings, humble words from a sect leader, a polite way of saying, show me what you've got. At that moment, the old man pulls out a nunchaku with a sharp tip. Soo prepares, hand on the sword. Then the chief advances, spinning the nunchaku wildly, saying that since his guest seems hesitant to go first, he'll take the initiative. The weapon is surrounded by aura spinning in a blur, and it rockets straight towards Soo's eye. But Soo pulls out his sword, makes an upward cut, and redirects the attack entirely. The nunchaku sails wide. The Shaolin monks around the arena are all in shock he managed to reflect the chief's opening strike. The chief, now spinning through the arena from the momentum of his own redirected attack, says the boy has truly reached the level of becoming one with the sword. It seems he's about to advance from his very first stage. Soo replies that the leader seems to have become one with the weapon as well. He learned a lot from that single exchange. The old man laughs and says it's funny that someone so young could be at the same level as him. Indeed, the boy was a genius. However, Soo laughs at the word genius. In fact, he can't even see it as a compliment. Everyone looks at him and thinks his martial prowess is impressive, something that would take others decades to achieve, and he reached it before the age of 30. He thanks the chief for praising his still insufficient skills. But inside, Soo knows the truth. He's still just one of the countless talentless people commonly found in this world. And yet, even without any martial talent, even without being chosen by anyone or anything, he was able to develop to this level, a level that now has people calling him a genius. Regression, after all, was an opportunity, and since they want him to be one fine, this time, he'll play the part. Soo announces to the chief that from this moment on, he will use sword energy. The old man thanks him and says that's fine, then he'll take things seriously as well. Soo unleashes the mountain destruction technique, first form. The chief dodges to the side. Soo attacks again immediately, second form, entering the mountain. Third form, the ascending vein. But the chief activates energy around his nunchaku and performs a series of devastating strikes that the protagonist defends against, one after another. Sparks fly, the floor cracks. The chief is simultaneously impressed and confused. What kind of kid under 30 has this level of monstrous martial skill? Su moves to the side and activates the seventh form, the mountain's depth. One of the cuts grazes the chief's face. The Shaolin monks are copy-paste shocked. All of them, mouths hanging open. It's impossible. How could the leader be pressured by a kid this age? By the 12th form, Su is forcing the chief into full retreat. The audience notes it's not just speed clearly. The boy's sword carries absurd destructive power behind every strike. One of the attacks connects cleanly with the nunchaku. The weapon vibrates violently. The chief trembles and looks genuinely scared for the first time. Su thinks it's time to end this. He jumps into the sky, activating the seven lights technique. Suddenly, a constellation of shining cuts appears in the air, converging downward in a single devastating pattern. The nunchaku is torn apart, shattered into pieces mid-air. The chief stares at the fragments of his weapon falling around him, mouth open. The Shaolin monks can't speak, and with that, the old man just falls to the ground and says he lost. Instantly, Su bows, thanks the man for the opportunity, turns and walks away, doesn't linger, doesn't gloat, just walks straight through the middle of the sect toward the exit. Everyone watches in stunned whispers and murmuring. At least he didn't suffer any ambush on the way out. The Hall of the Eight Respected was an orthodox sect. They follow traditional methods and the moral code. Honor in victory, honor in defeat. Obviously though, Su isn't satisfied with orthodox sects. He wants the unorthodox ones, the outlaws, because those are the places that will try to kill him, and that's where the real combat experience lives. His first goal in this third life was straightforward walk everywhere and reach the martial peak. Su recounts that he ventured through numerous medium-sized cities throughout the Suking region. Among these, he also lost at the Umul sect and the Hayang sect. He couldn't win against their leaders. However, he took victories in Gaoju and Yango, and now he's standing inside the Hojan sect. He delivers a cut to the captain in the purple robe, and the man is thrown backward, crashing against the wall, falling unconscious. The old chief laughs from his seat and says he must be the so-called first-class martial artist who's been challenging numerous places. Indeed, a skilled boy. Su thanks him, says he's been learning a lot from these fights. But then the atmosphere changes. A group of 10 men steps out from the shadows. The chief announces that Su will now have to face all 10 elders, consecutively. Su recognizes this instantly. This is how an unorthodox sect takes revenge. He says he thought the duel had ended with his victory. He's never heard of consecutive challenges, especially one where a single person goes against 10. The chief laughs and says it's funny he's never heard of something like that. Su responds that if other sects find out how Hojan operates, their reputation will be destroyed. However, the chief says that what actually happened here is very simple. Su suffered a small cut during the duel. That cut got infected, and unfortunately, despite everyone's best efforts, the boy died. A tragic loss. The sect took great care of the talented young martial artist, but some things can't be prevented, and as a dead man, Su won't be able to deny any of it. Su is already surrounded. He sees that these bastards are crazier than he imagined. The chief repeats it, his death here will keep their reputation intact. They've done this before, they'll do it again. But this is exactly why Su came to this place. He smiles, tells them to attack. He'll accept their ridiculous duel. Everyone advances, and Su thinks the moment has come for true combat experience. The scene cuts to night, a bar somewhere nearby. Everyone's drinking and talking about the martial artist who was dumb enough to challenge Hojan. Such a talented boy, dead like that? What a shame. The Mohawk guy at the table says the kid was crazy for provoking outlaws. The white-haired one laughs, says he was too naive, as if things always happen the way you expect. The standing one adds that all the boy did was accelerate his own death through arrogance. Hojan might carry the name of a sect, but everyone knows it's actually a group of bandits. By now, the body's probably been buried somewhere. Then someone steps through the door. One of the waiters turns to welcome the guest. It's Su Yunri, completely drenched in sweat, cuts covering every inch of his body, blood dried on his clothes, fresh blood still dripping from a few gashes. He asks for a bucket of instant noodles, please. The waiter, completely at a loss for words, just says it's fine and asks him to come in. Su sits down. The 3 idiots at the table don't say a single word, because here's what actually happened. Those 10 bastards almost really killed him. Not only was it 10 against 1, but their blades were also poisoned. The lucky thing was that during the time Su worked in the upper echelons of the Alliance in his second life, he learned extensive medical techniques. If he hadn't taken the healing pill at the exact right moment, he would have genuinely died in that room. And as soon as he killed the 10 elders, the old chief screamed for everyone else to attack. The entire sect, every member, all at once. To survive, Su had to fight like an animal. But there he is, alive, calm, eating noodles in a bar, right after stabbing the leader through the chest. He didn't kill everyone in the sect, he cut their tendons instead. Every single person in that building is now permanently crippled. No one is coming back for revenge. Their legs don't work anymore. However, Su notices his chopsticks are shaking violently. He took so many stimulants during the fight that his body physically cannot relax right now. Probably with the amount he consumed, he won't even be able to sleep for the next few days. And Su, staring at those trembling hands, thinks maybe this is the perfect moment to challenge an orthodox sect next. He finishes eating, grabs his sword, and walks out the door. And that's when the legend was born. Immediately after his victory against the Hojan sect, the young martial master ate a bowl of instant noodles and continued his journey without resting for a single second. That insane story began to spread throughout the people. The rumor traveled through every corner of Seogi, and a new martial title was born. The Spirit of Infinite Fight, Su-Yo-Hyun. His name has swag. The Spirit of Infinite Fight. This man goes around fighting non-stop. I respect that, honestly. The protagonist knows he doesn't have talent. His goal is the martial peak and beyond. That's why he needs to keep fighting. Constantly dancing on the line between life and death. For an ordinary man to break through the wall of talent, he would have to be completely insane. Those without potential are forced to embrace madness as their method. It's the only way a talentless person achieves what a genius does naturally. And so he traveled through countless regions, fighting dozens of duels every single day, against both orthodox and unorthodox sects, against anyone who would accept his challenge. 5 years passed. An explosion rips through a courtyard. Su is midair, activating the mountain destruction technique once more. His energy is flowing differently now, more fluid, more destructive, more precise at the same time. The technique feels like it's becoming the very heart of the sky. The blade's energy takes the form of lines, something that's only achievable when approaching the peak. But maintaining it for even a brief moment leaves his mind completely exhausted. If he can't sustain this, there's no reaching his dream. A guy attacks from behind. Su turns, defends, the energy dissipates on the blade, and the entire surrounding area explodes from the collision. The poor guy gets launched into a wall. The blade energy Su struggled to maintain crumbles in a single hit. Someone else emerges from the smoke, says he expected more from the so-called infinite fighting spirit. It's Director Kim, the strongest man under the heavens, obviously. Su picks himself up, dusts off, and congratulates his friend. Kim's gotten even stronger since they last met at the house, and the bastard has already undergone skeletal reconstruction in just 5 years. Su looks at his own hand, still a first-degree martial artist after all this time. The gap between them is so enormous that it's not even depressing anymore, it's almost funny. Talent really does reveal the worst in people when you don't have any of it. Kim says that after reaching the level of the conversion of the 5 energies, he realized something. He's become the strongest man in Yango. Nobody can withstand even a single attack from him. That's why he's been thinking of creating an organization and wants to offer Su a seat, a position of power. Su cuts him off immediately, says he's fine, he prefers to live as he is. He remembers that in every life Kim always ends up obsessed with leading an alliance. If Su accepted, he'd end up as vice leader, which really means strategist, which really means the same desk job he did in his entire past life. Every second of practice time is too precious to waste on bureaucracy and organizational management. After much insistence, Su declines. Kim then offers one-on-one private lessons instead. Su refuses that too. He's already learned everything possible from Kim across 2 lifetimes. What he truly needs now isn't technique, it's real combat experience. In his past life, Kim himself told Su that at the end of the first stages, the best way to advance is to face as many real battles as possible. So in this third life, Su chooses to watch Kim's growth from afar and continue his own endless journey of battles alone. And with that, 20 years passed. Kim arrives at the same house, their biannual meeting point. This time, he looks pale, troubled. Su finally understands something about himself. His talent was that of someone truly abandoned by the heavens. Kim tells him that even with infinite training, Su hasn't improved his prowess in any visible way. Su admits that his knowledge of blade energy exceeds that of any martial artist at his level. Even so, he can't last more than 3 attacks against someone at the peak. He gets crushed every time. Kim scratches his chin, thinking, this is genuinely strange. Su has almost become one with the sword. His technique is nearly flawless. How has he not reached the martial peak? Someone with this much experience and this much dedication should achieve that milestone easily. The math doesn't add up. Su already knows the answer. This is the limit of his talent. Someone banished from the heavens. Blood starts flowing from Su's nose. He explains that he can only maintain the blade technique activated for about half a day before his body starts breaking down. Maybe if he could keep it up all day, a full 24 hours without rest, he'd finally break through to the next level. Kim, however, picks up a book and says he's leaving a gift. It's everything he learned from fighting a cultivator for a short period. He survived by the narrowest margin, and the experience taught him things no martial arts manual could. Su notices the thickness of the book. It's incredibly dense, packed with information. He asks if just escaping from one cultivator really provided that much knowledge. Kim says they're walking natural disasters. Obviously, you need a deep understanding just to survive being in the same space as one. Soo thanks him genuinely and promises to preserve this knowledge for future generations. Kim says he's going to go seek another fight like that. All he asks is that they both meet again alive. But before he leaves, Kim drops a hint about how to reach the Marshall Peak. He says Soo needs to keep each piece of spatial information present in his mind at all times. Soo is confused. What does that mean? Kim explains. In the middle of a fight, Soo probably becomes aware of everything around him, where he can step, what's behind him, where enemies are positioned, the distance to each object. But this awareness only kicks in during brief moments, those sharp instants of danger. What Soo needs to do is keep that awareness active permanently, all the time, not just during combat, every second of every day. Soo just stares at him. How? Keeping the sword energy technique running already feels like it's tearing his skull apart. How is he supposed to simultaneously track the spatial position of every object, person, and movement around him? His head would literally explode. Kim disappears without answering. But Soo is certain there must be a reason the strongest man under the heavens gave this specific advice. It can't be meaningless. From that day forward, Soo begins trying to maintain awareness of everything his eyes and ears can detect. Every footstep of every person. Every shift in the wind, every bird in the trees. His consciousness navigates through the city, tracking each presence around him. He practices this in the forest for 5 years, combining sword energy maintenance with total spatial awareness. And every single time he opens his eyes after a session, he's hit with devastating nausea and dizziness. He's trying to absorb all visual and auditory information at all times, and his brain simply cannot handle the load. How is he supposed to fight in this condition when he can barely look straight ahead without wanting to vomit? The problem is, he's run out of options. Over 30 years, he's traveled through every sect, medium and large, in the entire region. There isn't a single one left to challenge. They've all either been defeated or they know who he is and refuse. So Soo resorts to hunting bandits for bounty money, fighting sneaky, dirty opponents who use every trick imaginable, ambushes, poison blades, traps, while he's so dizzy from the awareness training that he can barely stand. A guy appears from behind a bush and shouts to his boss that he found the bastard. Another one with a blade on his back says today's the day Soo dies. Soo just readies his sword and thinks even if he dies, he'll continue down this path. There's nothing else left to try. 15 years pass. Kim arrives at the house. He's genuinely surprised, says Soo really survived. Soo, his face covered in cuts and scars, the marks of 1,000 battles with bandits and outlaws, says yes. Once again, he came out alive. It's now been 45 years since the regression. And finally, Soo has reached a stage where he's proficient in processing not just what he hears and sees, but what he touches, tastes, and smells. All 5 senses at an advanced level, active simultaneously. His brain has adapted to the constant flood of information. And yet, even with all of this, he still hasn't reached the peak of a martial artist. He furrows his brow. How is that possible? 5 senses at maximum awareness, decades of combat, sword energy mastered. How has the breakthrough not happened? Kim says he's being hunted by cultivators now. They've put a bounty on his head. Anyone who kills him gets paid. 2 of them set a trap recently, and Kim barely escaped. But at least this time, he managed to leave a cut on one of their faces. Not a fingertip of face, that's progress. But he's realized something grim. It's genuinely impossible to face a cultivator at the formation stage. If he doesn't escape immediately upon encountering one, he becomes a corpse in that same instant. Lately, Kim says, he's been thinking that perhaps the convergence of the 5 energies is the genuine limit of a martial artist. The person who originally authored the techniques they've been studying must have reached the same conclusion. No matter what a mortal does, they'll never truly defeat a cultivator. Soo looks at Kim and sees himself. 2 men standing on opposite sides of the same wall. One gifted by the heavens, one abandoned. Both staring at the exact same barrier. It's almost funny how different they are and how identical their frustration looks. Kim apologizes. Says it's strange that Soo can simulate sword energy and even has all 5 senses peaked out. He has no idea why the breakthrough hasn't happened. Maybe a duel would help them figure something out. Under the moonlight, an explosion tears through the forest. Soo, pushing himself to the absolute limit, demands to know what the problem is. Why can't he break through? Kim says Soo should have reached the peak years ago by every logical measure. What he needs is a catalyst, a strong will, or emotion. Some event that forces him to exceed his natural limits and surpass the boundaries of his concentration and talent. Soo loses patience. In the last 50 years of his life, he has done nothing but fight. How much more desperate could he possibly be? He's suffered his entire existence trying to escape this level. He activates every scrap of energy his body possesses. He tells Kim that he sleeps with the sword in his hands. Keeps his energy running even in dreams. He can process and memorize any information he experiences while unconscious. He falls to the ground and asks the heavens why. Why won't they show him the next step? A 70-year-old man cursing the sky for his fate. It might look foolish to anyone watching, but he's followed the path of the sword his entire life and still has absolutely no idea what lies beyond. Kim watches this outburst quietly. Then he walks over to a nearby tree and starts making a series of cuts in the bark. inscribing what appears to be a new martial art technique. He says he's drawn something that might help strengthen Su's weak points. It won't guarantee anything, but learning it might help him calm down and find a new angle. Su looks at the inscriptions carved into the wood. When he looks up, Kim is gone, disappeared into thin air, again, without a goodbye. 5 more years pass, over 50 years since the regression. Su knows he doesn't have many years left in this body. He looks at the sky and asks aloud, has Kim already died? Apparently, once again this was the fate of both of them. His talent ends here. Just like Kim was unable to achieve what he wanted against the cultivators. No matter how much mortals suffer, they can never escape the design the heavens assigned them. But then Kim appears behind him, asks what the hell he's talking about. The man is wrecked, both arms gone, missing from the shoulders down. Su rushes over immediately saying he'll get medicine. But before he can move, Kim lifts off the ground and starts flying, with Su on his back. Su is confused the guy doesn't have arms. How is he even holding him? But Kim tells him not to worry about that. He tells Su to look behind them. They're being chased. A cultivator. This was the price Kim paid for blowing off a cultivator's arm. Actual permanent damage. But Kim isn't scared. He's excited. He, Yeon-hyun, managed to make a cultivator suffer real damage. He's finally glimpsed the stage that exists beyond the convergence of the 5 energies. With his own eyes, he has seen what the true limit of a martial artist looks like. A ball of energy materializes above them. Kim says he risked his own life force to reach this point. He sends the energy attack downward, and Su watches it obliterate the house, destroy half the surrounding forest in a single devastating blast. Kim tells him to watch carefully. This is the result of his lifelong work. Su, however, is staring at the crater where his 3-story house used to be. The house he built after saving money for 50 years. Gone. Just a smoking hole in the ground. Lucky thing he had no servants, or they'd all be dead. But he bites his tongue and forces himself to observe what Kim is showing him. The energy ball was actually a concentration of countless blades, stronger and more refined than any martial art Kim had ever demonstrated. Kim explains that this is how he destroyed the cultivator's arm through careful ambushes and lethal attacks, just to create one single chance. But now, finally, he could fight them face to face. Then the energy dissipates mid-flight. Both of them start falling. Trees splinter beneath them as they crash through the canopy. Kim lands hard, agonizing on the ground, telling Su not to forget these techniques. They're the achievements of his life. He wants them passed on to the world. Su tells him to shut up and rest because his life is at stake. Now is not the time for dramatic speeches. That's when a voice comes from the tree above. Someone says they've finally found the damn martial master in his final form. What a shame he fled to such a remote place. The cultivator tells Su to step away. This man is a criminal who committed crimes against cultivators. It would be best for Su to just leave. Su asks if the cultivator is here to punish Kim. The cultivator asks if the 2 of them are allies. In the same second, Su grabs Kim and runs. The cultivator watches from above, says it's insignificant. The boy should have learned from his friend's example. But since he wants to play, the cultivator will treat this as entertainment. Run as best you can. Purple energy spreads from the cultivator's hands. When Su looks back, there are zombies, animated corpses of dead warriors chasing them through the forest. Su keeps running, thinking he is way too old for this. His friend, the final martial master, and him, the spirit of infinite fight, being chased by zombies through a forest at night. Truly a bizarre situation. He tells Kim to wake up and say something useful. One of the zombies closes in wearing weirdly modern-looking clothes, but Su cuts its neck and it crashes into the others. He keeps fleeing, screaming that it should be Kim carrying him, not the other way around. The man who can fly is unconscious on the back of a 70-year-old soap maker. What a picture. The chase continues. Morning ends, night passes. Another morning comes. Su no longer knows how many times the sun has risen and set. He reaches the edge of a mountain. The cultivator lands behind him, genuinely impressed that a mere civilian withstood a 3-day, 3-night pursuit. But there's no escape now. Anything Su tries is useless, and the final martial master is already dead. Su says, obviously he knows that. He's a doctor. He could tell from the moment he picked up the body. The cultivator is confused. He asks if Su knew Kim was dead. Why did he keep running? All the cultivator wanted was Kim's body. Su could have abandoned the corpse at any point and fled to safety. Su laughs. The cultivator is confused by the reaction. Su thinks about how far he's come, all the techniques he's learned, a lifetime of practice, even though the heavens denied him everything. And a large part of his power came from Kim's teachings, someone from his hometown, his martial master, his brother across multiple lifetimes. With that, he draws his sword and says if the cultivator wants his friend's head, he'll have to take Su's first. The cultivator loses his patience, says that really, no one fears cultivators anymore. Apparently it's because Su has either abandoned life entirely or is simply too old to care about dying. However, it doesn't matter. He'll show this mortal a pain much worse than death. Suddenly, 2 arms shoot forward from the cultivator's side and connect to Kim's body. Sue looks back confused and sees his friend's corpse standing upright. The limbs have attached like parasites burrowing into Kim's dead flesh and hijacking his muscles. The cultivator grins and says, "Those are parasites. And now both of them will pay the price for trying to humiliate a cultivator." He orders the final martial master to kill his own disciple. Kim screams. His body lunges forward, and the first sword strike comes crashing down on Sue. Our boy crouches, turns toward the cultivator, and asks how he has the courage to end the legacy of a man like that. To use someone who spent their entire life mastering the sword as a puppet. The cultivator, however, is just smiling while Kim's body continues attacking. After each one powered by whatever energy the cultivator is pumping through those parasite arms. Sue is grateful for one thing. It's clear that Kim's body isn't able to use actual martial arts. The puppet is simply using the raw power the cultivator forced into it. No technique, no blade energy, no finesse, just brute strength and speed. However, that brute strength combined with Kim's physical frame, a body that underwent skeletal reconstruction and reached the convergence of 5 energies, is still far too absurd for Sue's old body to handle. He's trembling all over, saying that it was already a terrible disgrace to have to point his sword at Kim, someone who, in the end, was already dead. Someone who deserved peace. He apologizes silently, thinks that unfortunately there is nothing he can do. He needs to end this as quickly as possible. He activates the 21st mountain cut technique, the celestial sky. And in a flashback, he remembers once asking Kim about this particular form. It's the only technique in the entire mountain series that's named after a lake instead of a mountain. The truth is, Kim himself created it. So Sue was curious, did the name have any special meaning? Kim fell backward onto the grass that day and said the celestial lake reminded him of Lake Hatap up on Mount Bu. Apparently, it's a real region in Korea where they both came from. Kim thinks that whoever originally created this martial art technique might have come from Korea, just like them. And it was then that Kim realized why the technique had this name. Because a lake reflects the sky and the surrounding mountains. The surface of the lake remains still, but everything above it is captured in its reflection. The heavens above represent everything the practitioner has learned, and the lake that reflects them, that's the meaning of the single attack. One strike that contains everything you know. Kim's puppet body takes a hit to the core. Sue explains to himself that this is a technique where, for a short period, he can turn the enemy's own energy into fuel for his cut. A very unique martial art built specifically for someone like him, someone who has no power of his own and must borrow from others. But if Kim's body remains intact, the cultivator will keep using him as a zombie. Sue can't allow his master to be humiliated like this any further. He has to make sure nothing is left. He accumulates all the energy in the sword sheath, combines every technique he's ever learned across 3 lifetimes, compresses all of it into a single attack. But just as he's about to unleash it, Kim's body starts transforming, swelling, expanding. The cultivator pumped more power into the corpse, gave it more speed, more force. Kim's shape distorts into a grotesque ball of flesh, no longer recognizable as a person. Just a mass of muscle and energy being directed at Sue. Sue knows his life is about to end, so he uses this final moment to ensure his master won't suffer this degradation any longer. He charges toward Kim's mutated body. The flesh ball raises its arms. Sue swears to himself he can't die yet. The air around him, the sounds, the smells, the humidity, the temperature. He absorbs each sensation around him, pushing every sense to maximum capacity. Even as his brain screams that it's about to rupture from the overload, his eye starts to burn. He says he'll turn everything to ashes. However, suddenly he feels something strange and stops for a second. His brain, which seemed like it was about to explode instead of giving in to all the pressure, seems to have surpassed something. Like a wall that was always there, invisible and impenetrable, has finally cracked open. Sue finds himself standing in a void, wondering if he's fallen into some kind of illusion, or if he's completely losing his mind. Then he sees them. Strange red lines coming from Kim's hand. The attack slams into the ground hard, but Sue dodges, guided by an instinct he's never felt before. He notices that even his own sword now has a strange blue line running along its edge. He follows the path of the blue line, and the cut lands squarely on Kim's chest. In that moment, he wonders, is this the vision of a martial artist who has reached the peak? And strangely, Kim is smiling. The corpse's face, even in this state, carries an expression that looks almost peaceful, almost proud. The person who had been blessed by the heavens, and the one who had been banished from them, polar opposites. And yet, in a way, they were similar. Because in the end, both had spent their entire lives trying to escape the fate granted to them by the heavens. One died doing it. The other was standing at death's door. Sue cuts Kim's body into 50 pieces, says that at this moment, there is no longer the genius and the talentless student. They were just 2 men who had suffered against fate their entire lives. One had died and the other was already at death's door. He looks at Kim's face one last time, and it feels like his friend is asking, "Are you really going to stop here?" He says no. Su charges forward and destroys the entire mountain. When all the smoke rises, the cultivator is screaming with hatred. Su falls, saying that even this bastard won't be able to punish his corpse in death. He asks his martial master to rest in peace. With that, Su Yunryong finally reached the martial arts level he had desired his entire existence, and with that achievement, this life of endless effort came to an end. This was the third regression. This life was insane, the best one so far. Will it keep getting better? I don't know, but I do know that we're back where it all begins. Su stares at his own hand. He realizes he's back. In the past life, he fought from the first day to the last second and finally managed to conquer. He genuinely shouts, that he has finally reached the martial peak, the feat he had desired his entire life. At that moment, here comes the guy from the beginning. Poor thing. John Mayang-hoon is already marching over to hit him. The damn fool asking what the crazy person is screaming about, saying it's Su's fault they ended up here. However, Su sees something he's never seen before. A strange red line arcing toward his face. He ducks with his eyes closed, and John's fist sails clean over his head. The guy is confused. What does Su think he's doing? But even without looking, Su could perfectly see where John was and what he was trying to do. In his past life, he could also dodge this guy's attacks with his eyes closed. However, that was different. It was prediction. He would estimate the trajectory of future attacks by understanding the guy's patterns. Decades of martial arts let him read body language unconsciously. But this is something completely different. It was as if he had actual foresight. Even with his eyes shut, he had a total understanding of where John was standing, where his fist was aimed, the speed and angle of the approach, everything. That's why they say, it doesn't matter how many first-level martial artists there are. They will never defeat a martial master. Su can now completely see the trajectory of any attack from anyone weaker than him. Obviously, someone below his level had absolutely no chance at all. He could see numerous blue openings toward John, each one representing a trajectory or position from which he could counterattack. The red lines showed what the opponent's attacks were and where they were going. Against someone as pathetically weak as John, the openings were infinite, an embarrassment of riches. However, after a brief moment of analysis, Su's nose starts to bleed. His brain is on fire. He wonders if this is the price of the technique. Even using it for a few seconds on someone as unthreatening as John causes agonizing pain. John throws more punches, calling Su every name in the book, saying he's a son of a bitch who almost killed everyone. But Su just gives him a single hit on the back of the neck. The man drops to the ground like a sack of rice. Out cold. Su is standing there clutching his head, face twisted in pain, while Director Kim asks what on earth he's doing. One of the girls rushes over, wanting to know if he's hurt, if he's okay. He is genuinely shocked by how intense the pain was from using the vision for such a short period on someone so weak. The sequence plays out as usual from there. He calms everyone down, takes them to the cave, cooks some fruits from the forest. They build a campfire, and everyone falls asleep around it. Night comes. But outside, Su is practicing. Under the stars, he cuts a leaf with a twig. A single precise strike. No energy used to strengthen the twig. Pure precision. Pure understanding. Now he has time to actually analyze what the martial vision does. Red is the prediction of movement. Blue is the path to the target. Using this technique, he can see the trajectory of any opponent or even anything that exists. Now it's explained what Kim meant across all those years about the memory of the five senses. His friend forced him to strengthen his vision, hearing, touch, taste, and smell over decades, so that eventually, Su could calculate trajectories in real time. From the tip of the twig, he can see how to destroy each individual leaf hanging from the branches above. Indeed, the martial vision is incredible. He stares at the moon, concentrates for a second. When he opens his eyes, the training simulation changes. Multiple imaginary opponents surround him. In a single movement, he sees the blue lines on all of them and starts attacking, destroying each one in sequence, following the blue paths. Cutting through the air with absolute precision, the sun rises by the time he's done. He's happy. He's finally reached the martial peak. But obviously, even so, his head is still almost exploding, and that was just from fighting against leaves. The disparity between his mental capacity and the technique's demands is enormous. He grabs the 8 bamboo roots from the forest and begins to eat them, strengthening his body further. Over time and practice, he extends his vision activation from a few agonizing minutes to at least 3 hours. In this life, he's strong enough to do whatever he wants. Especially since he doesn't have to sell soap or herbs anymore, he can earn money just with martial power alone. Back in the cave, he takes a long look at Director Kim. This man is about to receive the most advanced starting package of any version of himself across all timelines. 6 volumes of everything Su has accumulated, plus the final teachings Kim developed before dying in the last life. This was all the knowledge Su had to pass on. For certain, Kim in this 4th life would surpass every previous version, which also means that whatever Kim teaches Su in return will be even more incredible than anything that came before. But Su has no idea how he himself will reach the next stage. Unlike his co-workers who were chosen by the heavens and given gifts, there's nothing Su can do but train endlessly. keep practicing the vision technique, get his mind accustomed to the strain. His first goal, feels zero pain when using the martial vision, and finally reach the level of the 3 flowers. That's the level Kim usually reaches in 3 years of casual training. Meanwhile, Sue will probably need another lifetime. What an unfair existence. The protagonist, however, says that he will finally live like someone at the pinnacle of the martial world. The next morning arrived, and as always, the fox the lord of the forest came to collect a price. Sue stretches out his arm, and at that moment, curiosity gets the better of him. He wonders how many red lines would he see if he used the martial vision on the fox. He looks. The entire view turns red, not individual lines, not neat trajectories he can track and analyze. A red shockwave, a sphere of crimson energy so dense it's more like a wall. Coming from every direction simultaneously, Sue feels confused, not understanding what he just saw, and in that moment, the fox bites his arm right off. Even as the arm is being torn away, he's more curious about why his entire field of vision went red than the actual pain. A few days later, the cultivators arrive, the ones who come to take his co-workers, and once more Sue is startled. No matter where he looks, all he sees is a stream of red energy spreading endlessly from each of them. Not lines, not trajectories. Pure, shapeless, omnidirectional danger with zero openings. This is the difference between a martial artist and a cultivator that Kim talked about across multiple lifetimes. There was absolutely no opening. Indeed, the most powerful martial artist would struggle against the weakest cultivator. Sue can now literally see why with his own eyes. Against a cultivator, there is no blue line. No path to victory, just red, in every direction. A few days later, he decides to ask the Sea Dragon King about it. He humbly introduces himself and says he's curious about something. Who wants to know what a mortal could possibly be curious about at this level? Sue tells him about the strange sphere of red energy he saw around the cultivators who came before, asks what it is. Hugh explains that those men possess a kind of consciousness. Some call it divine power. The simple explanation is this: while a mortal's consciousness is trapped inside their head, a cultivator's consciousness can engulf the surrounding area. It spreads outward, like an invisible sphere. Everything within that sphere is under the cultivator's awareness and control. Who says that as a spiritual being himself, he also possesses this ability. And with that, the Dragon King leaves, telling Sue that his curiosity should be satisfied. Since the conversation was in the local language, Kim, who still hasn't learned, was completely confused by everything he just witnessed. Shortly after Hu departed, the old hunchback appeared, took the last girl, and expelled Sue and Kim once again. But strangely, this time they fell into water, completely different location. Sue wrings out his shirt, wondering why the landing was so different this time. Kim comes out of the water all twisted, wanting to know where they are. They need to find people, a base, something. Sue looks around. He knows this place. This is Yango Lake, and the city of Sibukyango should be nearby. He points across the lake to a small town visible on the other side. They'll probably find what they need over there. Before Kim can even agree, Sue has already jumped into the water and told him to wait while he swims across. Kim is there twisting his clothes, asking why the kid just dove in without him. But the important thing is that Sue remembers this town. He went there in a previous life. It was a center for various bandits. He cleaned them out before. The leader was at the final stages of the first degree. The vice leader was still in the middle of the first stage. The rest of the crew was all small fry, but there were a lot of them. Last time, Sue had to poison his sword to deal with the numbers. One of the bandits spots a kid climbing out of the lake. He looks to the side and asks what the hell that is. There's some kid just crawling out of the water. The protagonist keeps advancing while the guy tells him to stay still if he doesn't want to die. However, before the bandit can even finish his threat, he's already swinging a club. Sue advances, hits the guy in the chest with his shoulder, sends him crashing to the ground. In that moment, he grabs the guy's weapon, points it at the next one, and tells him it's best he confesses how many people he's killed. The thug says he's killed 50. Just as the words are leaving his mouth, Sue has already cut off his head. The remaining bandits are grinding their teeth scared. Sue announces that from this point forward, anyone who has killed a person should come at him. In another part of the bandit base, some women are serving food and drinks to the men. The guys are ordering the women to obey when suddenly one of them stops and asks what all that noise is outside. The door opens. Sue is standing there holding someone's head. The boss, without even leaving his throne, calmly says there seems to be a little rat in the base. Everyone should draw their weapons. Sue replies that in this room, he won't be asking any questions. Everyone dies. Shortly after, the entire base is covered in bodies. The boss is lying on the ground, begging for mercy. Sue only wants to know one thing. How long has he been here? The boss says he arrived 15 minutes ago. Sue thinks to himself in his past life, this exact operation took him an entire day. He had to set the place on fire, use poison. Sue nearly died multiple times, but now he managed to end everything with a branch in 15 minutes. The gap between his current self and his past self is staggering. The boss tells him to wait, says he can show where the treasure is hidden. Sue just cuts off his head. He already knows exactly where the treasure is. He's done this before. He opens the cages and frees everyone who was trapped in the bandit den. All the prisoners, the slaves, the women who were forced to serve, they thank him for avenging the bandits. One of the freedmen humbly asks Sue to reveal his martial title. They want to know his name so they can repay this debt someday. Sue stands there thinking, what title should he go with? The Spirit of Infinite Struggle. Fitting name. The boy fell into a lake, swam out, and massacred an entire bandit fortress before his clothes were even dry. With the bandits' money, Sue and Kim go to the city of Changango. They buy identification plates and a house for both of them. Sue teaches Kim martial arts and the language of this world. 2 months later, just 2 months, Kim is already reaching the level of the 3 flowers. Sue realizes that the more knowledge he passes on, the faster Kim evolves. It's a compounding effect across lifetimes. As always, watching this makes him want to give up on everything. But he's felt that way his entire existence. For Sue, it takes a lifetime to reach the martial peak. For director Kim, it's a warm-up before lunch. Sue congratulates his friend, says it's amazing that he reached this level even before learning how to read properly in this world's language. Kim says he's also genuinely surprised to think he had such talent. And now Sue has a thought. He's never had a real, all-out duel with Kim at the exact moment Kim reaches the 3 flowers. This guy is always teaching or holding back. How would it actually go, Sue, at the martial peak versus Kim freshly at the 3 flowers? He offers the duel. Kim says it sounds good. Maybe now he finally has a chance to beat the kid. Back in the forest, the duel begins. Sue makes a cut that tears the entire ground apart. From midair, he sends a sequence of attacks using the Peak Mountain Dragon technique, and the red lines appear. Sue can see clearly the better Kim gets. The fewer blue lines he sees and the more red ones appear. He needs to keep dodging, but at this pace, he will never create an opening. The blue paths are shrinking in real time. Kim is closing every gap with frightening speed. And for some strange reason, a burning desire to win ignites in Sue's heart. He understands this moment right now is the last chance he will ever have to beat Kim in this life. This guy will continue to evolve at a terrifying speed. The next time they face each other, Sue won't even be able to dream of winning. Kim at the 3 flowers today will be Kim at the 5 energies tomorrow. The window is closing. It might already be closed. Sue is thrown back from one of Kim's strikes. Knowing that this is the only moment in his entire 4th life where victory is even theoretically possible, he decides to go all out. He pulls some hidden weapons from his fingers and sends them flying in Kim's direction. Kim is surprised, but manages to defend. Sue realizes that at least he managed to interrupt the rhythm of Kim's movements. He decides to show that he's ahead in one area combat experience. Raw, dirty, decades upon decades of real fighting, the sword is plunged into the ground and he unleashes a devastating barrage of strikes. Kim sees this and smiles, says he'll have to show Sue the power of the 3-flower stage. Sue feels the danger approaching before he can even see it. Kim throws his sword into the air, activates blade energy, and sends a slash screaming towards Sue. Sue knows he'll be torn in half if he tries to confront that attack head-on. However, the mountain destruction technique he learned was originally taught by Kim himself. But Kim had already reached the level of the 5 conversions in past lives, so Sue knows the counter. He unleashes the Echo Valley technique and an explosion sweeps through the entire forest. Trees crack, the ground splits, dust and debris fill the air. Amid all the smoke, you can see Kim's little bald head floating above the chaos. He says the kid is truly amazing. Sue, however, is shocked this bastard actually withstood his attack. Then Kim's blade falls to the ground and he says he gives up. His weapon broke. He says he's a disgrace. As a martial artist, having his weapon destroyed in a duel is embarrassing. He has to admit, Sue's combat experience is incredible. Sue tells him not to worry. He will never be able to defeat Kim again after today. And with that, he accepts the reality of his life. This fight marks the last day Soo Yun Ryong will be stronger than director Kim until the next regression. That's really harsh, right? The man just reincarnated, and he already knows that soon his friend will be completely unreachable. Back at the house, Sue says that since his friend reached the peak of the 3 flowers, he prepared a gift. Kim responds that the duel was already an incredible gift. But Sue brings out a bunch of books. Says these are the writings of someone who got close to cultivation and exceeded martial arts. He bought them from an old man in the city who said that to understand this content, a person needs to have at least reached the 3 flowers. Sue read a bit himself but unfortunately couldn't understand anything, so he'll leave it in his friend's hands. Kim thanks him and says if that's the case, he'll definitely dedicate himself. After learning to read the local language, Kim began to focus entirely on these studies. 4 months later, Sue enters the house excitedly, says he brought some money and managed to hunt a good bounty today. However, strangely, the books are lying on the floor, open. Sue is confused because he can't feel his friend's presence anywhere in the house. The rooms are empty. The courtyard is empty. It's like Kim just vanished. Then Kim materializes out of thin air. just appears, right next to Sue, scares the absolute hell out of him. Kim explains that he learned the techniques in those writings, the so-called powers that exceed martial arts. He's genuinely impressed that even Sue, a martial peak master, couldn't locate him. These martial arts were truly incredible. Sue, however, is terrified on the inside. He remembers this specific ability. Kim used to demonstrate this kind of thing, the ability to become completely undetectable in previous lives. But normally, he only showed this power after reaching the convergence of the 5 energies. That's a stage that usually takes years and years. But only 1 year has passed since the regression. How is Kim already using techniques from that level? Kim says that if a martial master at Sue's level couldn't perceive him, he could probably kill anyone in this world. The words hit Sue like a hammer. Even knowing this would happen, that Kim would continue to evolve exponentially talent, is something deeply hard to accept when you're standing on the wrong side of it. Kim announces he's determined to travel the lands for combat experience and invites Sue to come along. Sue, however, says he's not really interested. He believes he should focus on stabilizing his understanding of the martial peak. Kim thinks about it and agrees it makes sense, especially since Sue is still learning to use the blade line technique properly. Sue says yes, and besides that, he's interested in entering the imperial regime. He wants a government position. Maybe the time will come when he can help Kim from the inside. And with that, they go their separate ways for now. However, it's obvious that Sue has other reasons for wanting to enter the imperial regime. From the information he gathered while managing the martial alliance in previous lives, the imperial family was closer to the cultivators than any other organization in the entire region. Many people even said that the main family of Yango was actually related to cultivators by blood. That kind of proximity was exactly what Sue needed to investigate. He registers for the Yango military. They readily accept him. He already has a certain fame for hunting numerous bandits across the region. With the power he's developed at the martial peak, he easily becomes a general. From there, he applies to become an imperial guard and passes without issue. All in black, official. 5 years into the regression, and he's already a shadow guard of the imperial palace. As soon as he learns the espionage techniques and the methods to conceal his breath, he's placed in position. And on the day he meets the emperor, Sue discovers something truly surprising. The emperor is a cultivator. This becomes instantly obvious, because the man carries the consciousness of a cultivator, that sphere of awareness Sue learned to perceive through his martial vision. The emperor was born with a spiritual root, and it doesn't stop there. The slightest doubts Sue had were shattered when he met the rest of the emperor's family. Most of them are cultivators too. Their consciousness is clashing against Sue's senses. One thing he notices, however, is that these people don't seem to be at a particularly high level. None of them come close to the fox from the forest, but they clearly possess small auras of consciousness around them, probably in the initial realms of refinement. The emperor's consciousness, obviously, is much broader and stronger than all the others. With that power alone, he's stronger than every shadow guard combined. The truth becomes painfully clear. Sue exists as a guard only because the emperor is too lazy to kill the assassins himself. People have been trying to kill this man every single night, and the emperor can't be bothered to deal with it. That's what the shadow guards are for. And there's our protagonist, cutting another assassin in half. At least it's decent combat experience. 5 years pass with Sue serving the Empire as part of the Shadow Group. In the meantime, Kim became the leader of the Martial Alliance. And since Sue is a shadow guard who technically can't be seen meeting with the head of a martial alliance, they usually get together in secret over drinks. It's during one of these meetings that Sue starts noticing something interesting. The red lines around Kim have always represented the best trajectory for attack, but now, Kim is exuding countless lines from numerous angles. It's almost as if there's no position around Kim where he isn't dangerous. What surrounds him feels familiar. In fact, it reminds Sue of the consciousness he's observed around cultivators. It's a pity that it's almost incomprehensible to him. If only he had reached the 3 flowers stage, he would have been able to understand some of what he's seeing. But he hasn't. He's still at the martial peak. All he can do is continue observing Kim's current condition and hope that someday this observation helps him get there himself. He has no idea what exactly Kim is doing, but he feels that maybe this is the key to mastering the sword at a higher level. At that moment, Kim starts absorbing the surrounding air, and that's when it happens, the skeletal transformation, also known as the world's oldest plastic surgery. The man's body restructures, becomes younger, stronger, his hair grows back, his posture changes. Sue congratulates him, says he looks much younger. Kim says he finally reached the point of converting 5 energies into a core. It's just a pity, he adds, because if Sue were at a higher level, he would have learned much more from witnessing this process. Sue agrees, says he thought the same thing, but it's his own fault for having such mediocre skills. A little later in the forest, Sue asks if Kim has encountered any cultivators recently. Kim says yes. Sue brings up the domain around Kim's body. It's quite similar to the consciousness of those cultivators. Could there be some relation between the two? Kim confirms it. Within the region he controls, he can actually face a cultivator at the refinement stage. Humans who reach the convergence of the 5 energies can apparently develop something close to a cultivator's consciousness. Su processes this. So there's a chance for a martial artist to actually fight a cultivator. But just as the gap between a first-degree martial artist and the martial peak is enormous, the same distance must exist between Kim's current level and whatever comes next. More and more, Su won't be able to understand his friend's growth, but perhaps today's experience will help him one day reach the convergence of the 5 energies himself. Their conversation ends and Kim returns to his work. A few days later, while on guard duty, Su spots an assassin moving across the upper section of the palace. He feels a red line streaking toward him. This attacker is at the martial peak. The sword comes, but Su deflects it easily. Observing the way this person fights, it's clear they just recently reached the peak. Against someone who's lived at this level across multiple lifetimes, it's not even a challenge. The assassin lunges again. Su deflects all the attacks, but his mind is somewhere else entirely. The image of Kim at the moment of evolution won't leave his thoughts. He wonders if that had something to do with blade energy. The aura on his own sword proves he's already evolving in that aspect, reaching the intermediate stage. This happens naturally once you're at the martial peak, because as long as the sword follows the optimal path, it always carries an aura. The blue lines are the best possible trajectory. It's about maximizing potential to the absolute fullest. What he's realizing is that martial sword arts and blade energy are really the same thing. But that doesn't make sense, because if they were truly identical, when Kim was turned into a zombie puppet in his previous life, his body should have continued using the blade's aura, but it didn't. The puppet only used brute force, which means something human must be behind the attack. It's not just physical energy, it's the intention of the martial artist performing the strike. The red and blue lines aren't only trajectories, they're intentions. The moment Su reaches this conclusion, something shifts. He feels something strange while holding the sword, as if veins and arteries had extended from the blade and entered his arm. The assassin lunges once more, trying for the kill, but Su sends a single slash in her direction. Blood erupts. The girl spins like a Beyblade and crashes to the ground. Su stands there, still processing what happened. This wasn't the end. If he keeps feeding the sword with his intentions, he could advance even faster. The girl is on the ground, not understanding what hit her. After 10 years practicing as a master at the martial peak, Su finally learned the silk of the sword. The line of the sword, he's reached the intermediate levels of the peak. He approaches slowly and recognizes a familiar face. She was one of the maids who had recently been hired at the palace. He comments that reaching the martial peak at such a young age was impressive. She might have had enough talent to reach the 3 flowers if she'd survived. The girl, however, asks from the ground, is he the so-called infinite fighting spirit? Su is confused. He gave that title 10 years ago when he saved those people from the bandit camp, but in the city of Yango, apparently they call him something slightly different. The monster of infinite fighting. The girl tells him her brother is much more talented than she was, and it's all the damned emperor's fault. Su replies that appealing to emotions won't help. The rule here is clear: kill any assassin who enters this place immediately. The rest of the guards are arriving now, shouting about the intruder. The girl keeps telling Su he's wrong, that the emperor's orders are unjust, that people are dying. Su cuts her off. The act of listening to an assassin is itself a crime. He has to finish this now. Who thought this girl would last? She had 2 minutes of screen time. Goodbye. After disposing of the body with the other guards, Su notes that the commotion was significant, but the emperor hasn't left his room for a single second during the entire event. A silence technique has been applied to his door. The man clearly doesn't care if anyone knows he's a cultivator. Every shadow guard already knows the minimum requirement for the position is the martial peak, and at that level you can see the cultivator's aura with your own eyes. Everyone there continues to protect him because that's simply the job they were given. But something is bothering Su. Recently, the frequency of assassinations has been increasing significantly. This is strange because Yango is going through a period of extreme prosperity. There are still people in poverty, obviously, but it's no longer dire enough for everyone to turn to banditry. So who is so desperate to kill the emperor? And why did a girl from Yango, who recognized Su's title, end up as an assassin targeting the very ruler she supposedly serves? He turns away thinking he has time to figure this out. After all, he's more interested in the cultivators than the assassins. 10 years pass. 30 total in this regression. Through relentless hard work, Su earned enough trust from the emperor to gain authority over certain imperial documents. He can't access the biggest secrets, but now he can examine records and find clues about the cultivators, and it seems he finally located where they reside. Progress has been slow, much slower than he imagined. The cultivators' locations are far better concealed than anything he discovered as the Alliance strategist. But the experience he gains every night from fighting assassins, combined with constant observation of the people around him, is refining his perception. Maybe he'll actually reach the 3 flowers someday. He starts examining census documents and finds something strange. In the 33rd year, the number of orphans significantly decreased because of the emperor's policies. And as a result, banditry declined. Sue finds this odd. The information is too simple for a government document. Moreover, the most important detail is missing. How did the number of beggars actually decrease? Did they all starve and die? If so many people had really died at once, Sue would have known about it from his previous lives. And the document doesn't mention them finding jobs or receiving aid. They just disappeared. He remembers the girl from 10 years ago who said people were dying at the emperor's hands. The current emperor isn't a terrible leader average at worst. So, where did all these erased people go? Anytime official documents leave a gap like this, anytime information is missing, it always connects back to the cultivators. He decides he'll need Kim's help to investigate further. The scene shifts to the Martial Alliance. It's Kim's retirement ceremony. Many look sad and disappointed, but Kim himself looks genuinely happy. He only retires at the moment he masters the 6 levels of the cultivation scriptures. In other words, it's time for him to hunt cultivators. Sue opens the door and says Kim seems quite happy. Kim turns, says he thought it was an assassin, but it's his friend. He comments that Sue's aura has been changing more and more lately now. He really reminds him of an assassin. It's true. Years of killing in the shadows have altered something fundamental about Sue's presence. Sue shares everything he's gathered while working for the government. There's clearly a cultivator spy embedded within the empire. Since it involves cultivators, Kim is immediately and deeply interested. Sue warns that he'll cover all the regions where cultivators reside and asks Kim to gather information on his end. Together, they begin trying to understand the cultivators' true operations. One night, sometime later, a soldier reports that the North Gate is secure. Sue notes that the frequency of assassins has decreased recently. It also wasn't possible for enemies to constantly send martial artists. They had to run out eventually. However, the moment this thought crosses his mind, a fire erupts in front of him. A man is burning alive. Someone shouts that assassins have arrived at the East Gate. A figure approaches, holding a burning talisman, and asks if everyone present is at the martial peak. Then he laughs, says that vision technique is a disgrace because it prevents him from arriving secretly. The worst thing Sue imagined has happened. They sent a cultivator as an assassin. The white-haired squad leader tells everyone to prepare. The talisman cultivator says it's funny they think they have any chance. Against someone at the first stage of cultivation maybe, but he's at the second stage. His aura spreads along with the talisman's burning. He announces he's going to kill everyone here, these bastards, from the secondary family of the Melee clan. Everyone in the hall starts burning alive, agonizing, screaming. The cultivator is laughing while bodies writhe on the floor. However, amidst the flames, someone is still standing. The cultivator is impressed that Sue survived this attack. He says that for a filthy insect, Sue's gaze is quite arrogant for someone who only blocked one hit, nothing more. Things are about to get very intense. In the next moment, a sword breaks somewhere. An attack hits the barrier around the palace. Nobody from outside can enter. The talisman is blocking everything, which means they already know it's a cultivator attack. They would need reinforcements from inside. Everyone on the ground is agonizing while explosions rip through the hall. Sue is moving at maximum speed, cutting everywhere, saying he can't stop for even a second. He needs to evolve his sword from silk blade to strengthened energy. The talisman cultivator is laughing, asking how many times he has to repeat it. It's impossible to break this barrier with the power Sue possesses. Sue's attack hits the barrier hard. The cultivator laughs. But then the energies begin to clash, and the barrier starts to crack. Sue manages to bend it and push the cultivator back. The problem is that Sue is barely maintaining this technique. He has almost no understanding of how to properly use strengthened energy. And in the same second, he's thrown far across the room. Before he can recover, the talisman cultivator advances and kicks him in the middle of the back. Wants to know how an inferior creature had the courage to cut him. He was going to play with the kid before killing the rest, but he's changed his mind now. He'll impale Sue on spikes until he's completely unrecognizable. The rest of the guards try to help. They call out to the vice leader. They advance to attack, but they're all pierced. The cultivator turns around and warns them no one should interrupt. They're insects with no chance. It's best for them to accept that their fate ends under his foot. The guards obviously want to advance, but they're all hesitating. Can't blame them. It's certain death. Sue is on the ground. His entire body is destroyed internally. The cultivator crushes his hand, asking if he's still alive. Wants to know how long this insect will cling to life. Sue thinks that he really isn't different from an insect. The talent he has, the skills he possesses, the life he leads, all of it truly represents the existence of something useless. The cultivator is confused, asks what he's mumbling about. Is he begging to be spared? But Sue is thinking about something else entirely. He's trained for ages. Everything he's lived through hasn't disappeared. He begins to raise his destroyed hand. And in that moment, he realizes something about this cultivator. The man used hiding techniques and concealment magic. He had so much talent that he never trained his actual body, never learned how to fight at proper distance. He's merely someone born with enough talent to skip the work, blessed by the heavens. given power without earning it. Su, completely wrecked, grabs the cultivator's clothes, says he won't accept that everything he's been through, all the effort of this life, wasn't enough to reach a higher stage. This bastard will not be the one who makes him give up. And with that he shouts, even the effort of an insect carries meaning. The cultivator falls to the ground, confused, telling the bastard to let go. His nose is bleeding. Su realizes the poison has started working. That temporary technique he forced to break the barrier, it was never about power. It was about creating a split-second opportunity to land a poisoned cut. The cultivator's eyes and nose are hemorrhaging. He says he has to nullify this, detoxify. But Su approaches, asking if he really thinks that's going to happen. Now he'll taste the flavor of the insect he wanted to humiliate. Su covers the cultivator's mouth because most detoxification powers need spoken enchantments. He grabs the man's hands to prevent any sealing techniques, and tells the bastard to try something now. The guards rally. They rush to help Su hold the cultivator down. Outside, the talisman barrier cracks and reinforcements flood the castle. Shortly after, Su is being carried away, saying that the bastard who called him an insect didn't die much differently than one. Su Yunrin killed a cultivator, an actual cultivator, in his fourth life. I did not see that coming this early. The man poisoned a second-stage cultivator and held him down while the toxins ate him alive. Pure strategy. Zero divine talent. Just decades of medical knowledge and the willingness to sacrifice his own body as bait. In the next scene, Su sees smoke in front of him. He wakes up next to a doctor who's smoking right beside his bed. For some reason, in every story like this, I expected the protagonist to wake up next to a beautiful female doctor. But no, this is real life. He woke up next to a wrinkly old man blowing tobacco smoke directly in his face. The old man says tobacco is an extremely healthy herb and will improve his health. Su looks at him and wonders why this bastard thinks tobacco is good for anything. Then he remembers it's ancient times. Nobody knows cigarettes kill you yet. The doctor explains that the emperor sent his personal physician. Su's body feels light. The doctor was extremely skilled. He wanted to learn the man's methods. Then the doctor relays a message. The physician who healed him said Su's arm would recover, but it would never be the same as before. He needs extensive rest. Su remembers the cultivator completely crushing his arm. Obviously, he wouldn't come out unscathed. He responds that he's already happy he can use it in any capacity at all. The doctor also says the emperor was impressed with Su's willpower and sent a reward. Unfortunately, the emperor himself can't directly give anything to shadow soldiers, so the doctor delivers it on his behalf. He makes a formal speech in the name of His Majesty. The vice guard of the shadow leaders risked his life to defend the throne and is therefore awarded a void pill. Su opens the container and sees a strange red pill. The doctor says it seems to be something essential for building energy, something about the stages before cultivation. However, the old man has no idea what it actually means. Su examines it with his medical expertise and immediately recognizes what this is. It's a pill made from the remnants of a true cultivation pill. Back when he worked as a doctor, he also made elixirs. Every time one is produced, there are leftover materials that can be used for a slightly inferior version. But the essence has already been extracted. The emperor probably doesn't think most people have the knowledge to recognize this. The effect would be so minimal, it basically serves as a hangover cure. But the old doctor mentions something interesting. From what he's heard, any mortal who consumes this item can increase their lifespan by 10 years. Su's eyes widen. That doesn't match the pill's quality at all. But the doctor seems genuinely interested in the item, even though he obviously can't steal something given by the emperor. Su thanks him and says he'll use the pill as soon as his energy stabilizes. The doctor leaves, telling him not to forget the emperor's kindness. But privately, Su decides he'll keep this for a long time. He won't eat it now while he has plenty of energy left. He'll save it for when he's on the verge of death. If it really can extend his lifespan by a decade, the timing of consumption matters more than anything else. 10 extra years of life means 10 extra years of evolution. Working for the Empire really does come with benefits. Then reality crashes back in. The sword rolls across the floor. Su looks at his completely destroyed hand. His body healed everywhere else, but now every time he grips the hilt, immense pain shoots through his arm and he drops the weapon. He can't even perform the 24 basic techniques of the Mountain series. Is this the end of his martial arts career? No. Life on the martial path has always been full of suffering, so what if he has to add a little more pain? It's always accompanied him like a shadow. This won't be the thing that makes him quit. In fact, he'll use this to further enhance his prowess. 10 years pass, 30 total in this regression. He's gotten used to the sword with the damaged arm. His control of the silk blade technique has improved. He's becoming increasingly skilled with hidden weapons from his work as a shadow guard. Meanwhile, Kim has been sending letters. The secret of the cultivators is about to be uncovered. These beings live in places hidden from the rest of the world, protected by barriers that make their locations completely invisible and inaccessible. The weaker cultivators create mansions among mortals, but the truly powerful ones hide behind those barriers. And there are normal humans living with them, slaves and servants who do everything the cultivators need. According to Kim's research, the assassins being sent to kill the emperor all come from a cultivator clan. They recruit mortals within their domain and train them from childhood to become peak assassins. The poor who disappear from the census records, they've been sent to these cultivator territories, raised as weapons or kept as slaves. It's a clan dispute, one cultivator family sending killers after the emperor, who belongs to a rival family. Kim appears in person, saying the letter took a month to arrive. He came because he discovered something extremely frightening. Sue asks what, but Kim says first they need to remove a suspicious surveillance technique that might be monitoring them. Then Kim explains. There were two cultivator clans in the Yango region, the Meli clan, which currently dominates everything, and the former imperial clan, the Jin clan. For countless decades, these two have been secretly fighting each other over the nation's resources. The Meli finally managed to expel the Jin, who lost power hundreds of years ago. The moment the Meli took control, the Jin lost most of their members and significance. That's why the Jin have been training mortals as assassins. It's their only remaining weapon. Sue says he already knew this from the letters. Kim says the important part comes now. How does Sue think the Jin clan creates so many mortals who reach the martial peak? It's almost like a factory producing peak-level fighters. Kim explains that most of these people are infused with vengeful spirits from their own families. This pulls all their life force and willpower to the maximum, pushing their natural talent to its absolute limit. Sue asks if the Jin clan is killing family members to create these vengeful spirits. Kim says no. In fact, it's the current regime, the Meli clan, that killed the families of all these people. The Malay clan has been kidnapping orphans, beggars, and poor farmers to turn them into elixirs. With the innate energy they steal from people's lives, they create pills that extend cultivator lifespans. To collect enough raw material, they prey on the absolute lowest levels of society. That's why the census numbers don't add up. That's where the poor people went. Sue says this is basically cannibalism. Kim says yes. These people are literally eating humans. Sue can't believe it. These cultivators aren't of demonic origin. They follow Taoist principles. Their stated purpose is ascending to the heavens. So why are they doing this? He remembers the assassin girl who warned him that people were dying. He dedicated his entire life to protecting these bastards. And in the end, he killed countless innocent people with his own hands as their guard. Kim says that while investigating the Malay clan, the Jin clan contacted him. They offered an opportunity to attack. Kim decided to join. He couldn't allow human-consuming scum to remain in power. He's been traveling through martial sects recruiting masters for this cause, and he asks Sue to join. Sue wonders if the life where he died to cultivators was this stupid conflict the real reason behind everything, and yet for this cause, he'd been wasting his existence guarding the very people responsible. He says fine, he'll participate. That day, Sue left the palace with Kim to join the forces planning to attack the Malay clan's stronghold. They arrive at the pavilion in the city of Sikyo. Every top martial artist in Yango has gathered here. The elders of the 4 stars, the 3 demons, masters from the best sects in the entire region. Every single person in this room has reached the martial peak. On top of that, there are 10 martial masters who have reached the level of the 3 flowers. If cultivators didn't exist, these people alone could conquer the entire empire without breaking a sweat. One of the old men immediately objects. Why did they bring a guy who works for the government? They can't trust someone so close to the emperor. Another one agrees he doesn't trust anyone associated with the imperial regime. Sue takes a deep breath and shouts that the emperor is a son of a bitch. The room goes silent. Everyone stares at him like he's lost his mind. Sue continues, that guy is a bastard. The old man raises his hand and says he understands. They trust that this kid doesn't like the emperor. Sue wipes his face, saying it's a shame because he still had a lot more to say about that man. With that, the martial masters accept him. They set off together toward a Meli clan base. Upon arriving, Sue sees a group with a red-haired person staring them down. The man says their strength isn't bad at all. However, what catches Sue's attention is the clothing these Jin clan members are wearing. It's the same type of outfit as the talisman cultivator he killed at the palace. In other words, that bastard he poisoned was indeed a cultivator from the Jin clan, sent as an assassin against the Mali-backed emperor. Kim tells the red-haired leader that he kept his promise and brought everyone who agreed. He hopes they can accept this help to kill those bastards. The man simply replies that everyone should prepare to leave. Sue asks where Kim is going. Kim tells him to follow. They arrive at a cemetery, rows and rows of graves, bodies that Kim had personally recovered, people killed by the Meli clan. He made as many graves as he could to at least give them a proper burial. Sue asks if he did all this alone. However, Kim doesn't answer directly. Instead, he activates a technique from the path of the heavens. He says that the souls of everyone buried here were filled with vengeance from being murdered by those bastards. And to allow them to depart peacefully, he learned some spells that showed these souls the way forward. It was good for Sue to never forget that not all power used by a cultivator is disgusting and cruel. The important thing is how the strength is used. Keeping your heart as a human at all times was as important as continuing to grow stronger. Sue stands there, somewhat speechless. Kim says the time to leave has come. On another part of the mountain, someone from the Jin clan performs a technique fingers joined, energy concentrated, and says they'll open the way to the entrance of the Malay clan. With that, the landscape of the forest suddenly transforms. A castle materializes where trees used to stand. Sue is completely disoriented. The entire view around him has changed. However, at the same time, the air carries a horrible smell of blood and rotting corpses. The stench is overwhelming. From the castle walls above, someone shouts that intruders have arrived. The Jin clan has finally attacked. A barrier rises, protecting the entire Malay stronghold. The red-haired Jin leader says that as always, their defensive technique was excellent. Kim steps forward. One of the Jin members in the back wants to know who this mortal is, marching ahead of everyone as if he has some kind of permission. The leader says yes, he may be mortal, but he is special. He knows it's hard to believe, but in terms of prowess, they're on equal footing. Kim starts to concentrate energy in his hand. Sue recognizes it immediately. This was the same devastating attack that destroyed his 3-story house. The energies converge into a single point of destruction, and Kim fires directly at the barrier. The blast sweeps the entire area. The Jin clan members are standing there with their mouths hanging open. The barrier now has a massive crater torn through it, and from the gates, a horde of zombies starts pouring out. The chief shouts for everyone to pass through these creatures and enter the castle. Sue charges in, cutting through zombies left and right. The Malay clan members inside are panicking, screaming that the enemy brought numerous top martial artists. They need reinforcements. Sue, however, is focused on something else. He recognizes those damn zombies, those familiar clothes. The cultivator who made zombies and used them to turn Kim into a puppet in a previous life, that bastard was from the Malay clan. But something strange catches his eye. He can see lines of intention in the zombies. Zombies are supposed to be willless creatures. They shouldn't have any trajectory lines at all. Why would they display intent? Perhaps it's the cultivator controlling them, projecting his will through the corpses, but even that doesn't fully explain it. Then he spots a guy on the battlefield with an aura surrounding him. Zombies are clustering around this man protectively. Judging by the size of his consciousness, Sue realizes this cultivator is still at the first stage of refinement. Sue advances boldly, cuts through the guy's barrier and slices his forehead, then poisons him. The cultivator drops to his knees, begging to be spared. Sue tells him to explain what he just saw. Next to the man is a cauldron, and surrounding it a multitude of bodies. The cultivator confesses everything. This was the process of the first refinement. They extract the blood and energy from mortals to create the first part of the origin formation. Then they deliver this concentrated origin, essentially a pot of condensed human life force, to their superiors. The superiors take it somewhere else, where they complete the process by mixing the origin blood with the 5th refinement. When the alchemy is performed on thousands of mortals, the rejuvenation pill is finally completed. And if Sue wants it badly enough, the cultivator offers to hand over this batch of origin blood he just finished. It was only the first stage, but it was worth many lives. Sue thanks him for the information, says now he has absolutely no reason to hesitate killing anyone in this place. But before he can finish the job, a halberd comes flying at him, forcing him to let the cultivator escape. Sue turns around to see who attacked and freezes. It's his old squad, the shadow guards he worked with for years. The squad leader tells him to be silent, calls him a traitor. An explosion rocks the building behind them, and Sue asks, "Are you calling me a traitor, squad leader? Do you even know what the imperial family has been doing?" The chief advances, ordering a strike. Sue manages to dodge. He asks if the man knows the truth. How does he have the courage to swear loyalty to these people? What kind of human does something like that? The man continues attacking, saying they are the arms and legs of the emperor. They don't think for themselves. They simply move according to his will. Sue calls him an idiot. To the emperor, they were nothing but common people, cattle. But the chief kicks him in the stomach and pushes him away. Sue realizes this bastard's skills have improved dramatically. He's approaching the peak of the 3 flowers. Then the chief asks a question that hits different. Does Sue think his side is any better? Tell him what's the big difference with the Jin clan he joined. Sue is about to respond, but the man cuts him off. He says no, they're also the same. The Jin clan sees common people as insects too. The scale of importance they place on human life is exactly the same, even if the methods differ. In the end, they would also grind the empire's citizens to get what they wanted, and maybe they'd prove to be even worse than those currently in power. Now I have to disagree with the old man here. How could anything be worse than killing thousands of citizens and throwing them into a cauldron to make pills? But Sue doesn't have time to argue philosophy. At that moment, Su sees a sequence of red lines converging on him. He realizes he won't be able to block, but in the middle of the squad leader's body, he notices something new. A strange purple glow. What is that color? He's never seen it before. The chief says it doesn't matter if one side is better or worse. He will choose to remain loyal to the side he belongs to. He attacks with the halberd. Su prepares. He can see the man channeling strengthened energy, an all-or-nothing finisher. The chief's conviction is absolute. Seeing this determination, Su responds with the mountain cut of the echoing veil. The energy expands, cutting through the entire battlefield. The old man is frightened by the scope of the technique. Su stands still, saying he will honor this determination. Unfortunately, however, he only has one technique that can block a strengthened attack at this level, and the problem is that he can't control the power well. Su can't control it, he says, but he destroys the squad leader's arm. The old man suddenly switches from fighting to praising. Su says, no matter how many times he sees Su's swordsmanship, it remains incredible. Su approaches and says his technique is far from refined. He's just an ordinary person. The old man, however, falls to the ground and insists, far from refined? That technique is about to reach the awakening of the three flowers. The most wonderful form he's ever seen. His whole life, he's been seeking martial awakening to reach the three flowers. But when he finally glimpsed the peak, he realized it was nothing more than a low level for any cultivator. Everything he devoted his life to would never come close to them. He learned that his lifelong pursuit was, in the eyes of cultivators, meaningless. So he kept searching for a path to justify his existence until now. The old man falls, saying it's just a pity they carry different destinies. Not even girlfriends praise as much as this old man. It's a shame he spent his whole life on the wrong side and won't change in his final moments. Su goes quiet, fixes his gaze into the distance. Then he turns and asks why didn't anyone interfere in this fight? They were surrounded on all sides. If the other shadow guards had jumped in, the squad leader would have survived. Su would be the one lying on the ground. One of the men replies that it was the squad leader's request. Vice leader, he said that if they all attacked, Su would use poisoned weapons. What the leader wanted was a duel of pure martial strength. Su finds it strange that they still call him vice leader. The men put their swords to their chests and say once a commander, always a commander. And once they swore loyalty to the emperor, it remains eternal. Su asks if they intend to maintain this loyalty. The men don't waver. Su apologizes, says if that's the case, he'll have to fight everyone present. He speaks with an air of quiet authority. Meanwhile, in the city, explosions are happening everywhere. Kim is commanding everyone to advance, shouting that they need to destroy the Mlay clan's refining furnace. The team continues to push forward. In the air, men who seem like wizards are using magical talismans to create a rain of fire. One of the soldiers is screaming about where the hell the reinforcements are. Where's that idiot from that family? Back with Su, another blade cuts through and another guard falls. The protagonist is getting exhausted too. One of the fallen soldiers sees the needle embedded in his armor and knows he'll be paralyzed. He asks, why did Su choose such a difficult path? Because Su didn't kill anyone, he paralyzed all of them instead. The man wants to know Su could have killed everyone without getting hurt himself. So why did he take injuries just to immobilize them? Su replies, because you still call me vice leader. The soldier is surprised. Then he falls face first to the ground and says that until the end, Su was an interesting man. He asks if Su finally managed to reach the three flowers. Su sheathes his sword and says unfortunately, he hasn't reached that level yet. He's just beginning to understand how it works. The truth is, he saw the third color a strange purple line, but he can only perceive it inconsistently. Perhaps he needs another long life of fighting and dying before he can see it clearly. At that moment, a voice booms from the rooftop. Someone says Su's skills have reached an impressive level. That's why his father sent him. Su recognizes the man immediately. Prince Mlahan. Su says it's been a while since they last met, Crown Prince. If he's been watching from the beginning, why didn't he interfere? The prince laughs, saying if he had, it would have been less fun. Besides, he tells Su not to call him Crown Prince here. Today, he's just a representative of the Meli clan's reinforcements. The old guard, confused, calls him Prince. Mlahan gets irritated and says since they insist on using titles, he'll share something. Does Su know how he became the Crown Prince? His aura begins to spread. Massive. Overwhelming. A great cultivator's consciousness fills the entire panel. He says he reached the refining stage at a young age, just like his father. No matter how significant Su's growth has been, at most he could face someone at the third stage. So how could someone Su could have beaten as a child possibly lose to him now? Furthermore, it's funny for him to think the emperor actually needs bodyguards. Su assesses the situation quickly. Even martial masters at the Three Flowers would have to risk their lives against this monster, and Su hasn't even reached that level. If he fights this man, he's certain to die, but a smile forms on his face. The reason is obvious. He is not afraid of death. If dying means getting closer to understanding these purple lines, how important is death? If one can awaken at dawn, then there's no problem dying at dusk. That's what Kim taught him while fighting against 50 cultivators in a past life. Back then, Su never understood this teaching, but now he's finally starting to comprehend. The prince laughs. Can't believe this fool is advancing with the certainty of death. Calls him more of an idiot than he imagined. Su jumps. A black mist appears on his sword. He launches a cut in the prince's direction, saying that today he will take martial arts to the limit. From the prince's perspective, he sees Su jump. The black mist appears on the sword, and then Su vanishes, completely. The prince is confused, wanting to know where he went. What happened is that just before the attack, Su finally understood the writings about the peak of celestial martial arts. He'd memorized everything across multiple lifetimes, but until today, he could barely comprehend a single line. He could perform techniques from the text, but he couldn't understand them. Yet at this moment, when he saw the strange purple line for a second, he seemed to understand what the pinnacle of martial arts meant. The book said, "If a martial exchange is a collision of colors, perhaps the color itself can be attacked." This was one of the phrases Su never managed to understand, until finally he got close to comprehending the peak of the three flowers, and now everything makes sense. The idea behind the colors and their meaning goes far beyond different martial arts. He seems to be cutting the prince's aura of consciousness itself. And in that moment, he understands the meaning lies in cutting the very perception an opponent has of his existence. The prince is standing there wondering where Su went. Meanwhile, Su is right in front of him. He vanished like a ghost because he cut the prince's ability to perceive him, just like Kim used to disappear. Kim could do it because he cut Su's perception of his presence. It was never invisibility, it was the elimination of awareness. This is a martial art created to stand face to face with a cultivator, a technique designed to surpass the heavens. Su's blade reaches the prince's neck, but it collides with an invisible wall. An armor of aura around the prince's body stops the cut cold. Mlehan is confused, asking what trick Su used. Su tries to understand why it felt like hitting a barrier around the man's body. Then he's pushed backward, crashing into the ground. The prince says the mediocre trick was amusing, but it's over now. The prince declares Su is nothing against a true cultivator. A great tornado expands in front of Su, who knows he has to dodge immediately. Coming out from within it, blades of wind fly in every direction. Su retreats, but everything around him is being completely torn apart and destroyed. Trees split. Ground craters. The air itself becomes a weapon. Su knows he won't be able to get within an inch of the prince because those wind blades are lethal. Not to mention that even if he somehow manages to close the distance to the body, he still has to figure out how to get past that strange invisible defense around the prince's skin. At least dodging is manageable as long as he stays outside the zone of the prince's consciousness. The problem is that cultivators use spiritual energy. Their stamina is essentially infinite. Su will become exhausted long before the prince does. He can't drag this out. He needs to end it as quickly as possible. He needs to evolve to the peak of the three flowers, right here, right now, in the middle of this fight. The prince's expression shifts to confusion. Looking at Su, he asks what the hell he thinks he's doing. He looks exhausted. Is he still trying? Another blade of wind comes flying, but Su activates the mountain cutting technique and slices it clean in half. The prince is bewildered. How is that possible? Su notices his arm and sword are screaming in pain, but retreating would mean losing. Fighting while backing away is impossible against this kind of opponent, so he holds his ground. Another dozen wind blades come flying at him simultaneously, and Su activates the greatest sequence of techniques he has ever performed in his life. The landscape painting of the joy of mountains and peaks, flowing to the summit of the rugged click stone. This is no longer a technique. It's literally an entire poem being written in the middle of battle. One attack after another, flowing into the next like verses in a hymn of destruction. Su says to himself that he cannot stop, no matter what. If he pauses for even a second, his body will be destroyed like a rag. Su, however, remains standing, sending various techniques, wanting to know how this mortal has the courage to act like this. Suddenly, a giant mouth emerges from within the tornado, some kind of desert lizard beast constructed from wind energy, and the prince orders Su to die. Su at that moment is certain he won't be able to dodge this one. His instincts are screaming that he'll die instantly the moment it touches him. However, at that moment, that doesn't worry him at all. He follows the purple line unconsciously, wondering what purple actually means. Blue is the line of protection. It originates from him. Red is the line of will, originating from the enemy's attack. He begins to realize perhaps the purple was both protection and attack, hatred and the intention to intervene against him, both colors existing in the same space at the same time. The monster rushes forward, and Su understands. He always imagined that the opponent saw red. However, from the opponent's perspective, everything is obviously inverted. What is blue to Su is red to the enemy. What is red to Su is blue to the enemy. It all comes down to a matter of perspective. In the end, all lines have the same color. A martial art cannot be complete by itself. It needs its enemy to make any sense. The peak of the three flowers is a level at which you can comprehend a reflection of yourself in your opponent. Now Su understands what the peak of the three flowers truly means. By understanding how the enemy sees him, he begins to realize he's been wasting energy in a foolish way. The sword technique, the one he could barely maintain for a single second when he poured everything into it, is now explained. A martial art is not performed solely with one's own strength. The perception of the opponent and the world is what truly completes it. And with that, he activates the mountain-destroying technique. Final form. The cut goes toward the desert lizard, straight into its mouth. Smoke rises in every direction. Meanwhile, the guards who had been paralyzed were watching Su's fight the entire time. Every single one of them knew the outcome of this battle. His resistance was irrelevant. A common man fighting against a cultivator, a martial artist against an immortal being. There was no chance. However, the guards cannot believe what they are seeing. Su Yunrong stands there with the 3 flowers of the peak awakened, fully blooming around him. He begins to breathe deeply and realizes that all the energy he had been wasting is returning to him. It's flowing back into his body, recycled through the new understanding. Mlehan is trying to comprehend what Su thinks he's doing. However, Su just tells the Majesty to prepare himself. The prince executes another sequence of techniques, telling Su to stop getting excited just because he broke a single spell. He wants to see this mortal get through the rest. Suddenly, 4 more desert dragons materialize from the wind, jaws open, charging directly at Su. However, Su advances. He no longer feels that any of these creatures have the ability to kill him. Now that he's reached the level of the 3 flowers, he realizes that the peak of transcendence and the martial cut of the mountain were all part of the same martial art. They were never separate techniques. They're pieces of the same whole, and he can finally see the connections. The dragons continue advancing. Su makes a combination of techniques, the mountain transcending the peak. He is literally flying now, wrapped in the aura of the tiger, activating the transcendence of the peak of light directly toward Mlehan. The prince tries to defend himself and launches another explosion towards Su, shouting that he is a mere mortal and should stop with these ridiculous tricks, dreaming that he could surpass this cyclone. Su, almost invisible amidst all the chaos, realizes something about this cultivation technique. It's the concentration of thousands of spinning wind blades. However, he can see through them now. He activates 2 more techniques, the destruction of the mountain and the painting of the landscape, and notices that he can actually defend against those strange blades, block them, redirect them, something that was absolutely impossible just minutes ago. And is standing still, not understanding what is happening. How is a mortal deflecting his wind blades? Su approaches with his sword glowing. Now he understands why he could never get past those defensive techniques before. However, the energy of the sword is completely different from raw force. He lashes out at Mlehan's neck. The cultivator bleeds. Hand flying to his throat, eyes wide with shock, he tries to cover the wound and launches another explosion forward. But Su just reflects it and stands still. Holding his bleeding throat, tells Su not to come closer. He launches another explosion, a sequence of blades. Then he turns and tries to flee. Su, however, is already behind him, warns that he won't let him escape today. One cut, clean through, the prince's body separates completely. Only the upper half falls to the ground, and the cultivator still doesn't give up. He turns around on the dirt, confused and furious. Wants to know how a mere mortal was capable of something like this. Then Mlehan's tone changes. He tells Su not to come closer, to stop thinking that what he's doing is righteous. Does Su think the Jin clan is very different? Does he really believe that the cultivators of the Jin clan reached the stage they're at without consuming pills made from mortals? And there's more. Su should remember that Mlehan's father gave him a void pill a few years ago. If he consumed it, then to this day he is no different from them. The words hang in the air. The pill, the reward from the emperor, made from human lives. Su reaches into his belongings, pulls out the void pill, the one he's been saving, the one that could extend his life by 10 years. The one he was going to use when he was about to die. He destroys it in his hand, crushes it to dust, tells the prince not to worry. He does not intend to consume anything made by those disgusting cultivators. Mlehan is lying there, half a body, eyes wide, saying nothing. Su tells him goodbye. He goes to make the final cut. But another blade comes from behind. The cut passes through Su's head. It was too good, wasn't it? For a moment the world tilts. Su wonders why his body is upside down. Then he understands. He was decapitated. This is not an attack that someone at the beginning of cultivation could perform. It drastically surpasses the prince's level. Only an advanced cultivator or someone like Kim, who has already reached the peak of the 5 energies, could create something like this. Su's head hits the ground. He begins to have flashbacks. Every life he's lived, from the first to this one, flashing through in rapid succession. He sees a scene of Kim killing a cultivator and celebrating. Finally a martial artist could stand up to these men. And Su thinks, a long time ago, in their second life, everything ended in an instant. He saw Kim surpass the cultivators, and in that moment, hope was born. Hope that one day, Su himself would defeat them. But that day collapsed quickly. On that day, Su couldn't do anything. He repeats to himself, he just needed to be stronger, to have tried even harder. Maybe he would have gotten further, But now that he's reached this level, he cannot let himself die like this without doing anything more. This was not the moment. He needed to kill that man. My friend, you lost your head. Literally. I think you're done. But I have to admire the endless motivation of this character. Meanwhile, Mlehan is looking at a talisman on his chest. He says he survived thanks to an item his father had given him, a rare, single-use artifact that creates an attack at the key construction level of cultivation, far beyond anything someone at the beginning stages could produce. He laughs. Says mortal, I won. Pows. However, let's look at the state of things. The prince has no legs. The protagonist has no head. Both of them on the ground, separated from essential body parts, each claiming victory and defeat in the same breath. What a picture. Sue wonders, do cultivators really win in the end every single time? He sees another flashback. Kim celebrates killing his first cultivator, but then a dozen more appear in front of him. They say there are many others. Kim is nothing but a mere mortal. Confused? Kim doesn't understand why there are more than 50 of these men. In fact, no matter how strong a martial artist is, no matter that he defeated one cultivator, there were countless others at the key construction stage. They say there are more cultivators than stars in the sky. Sue's hand twitches. A small movement. Mlehan, lying on the ground, half dead, mutters, "What the hell?" He used all his energy. Sue knows that for mortals, this was like an endless wall, a path that cannot be crossed. And at that moment, he almost gave up. He was so overwhelmed by this knowledge that he wished he had never learned martial arts. He wished he could just become a soap seller once again. That simple life, a small house, making soap, dying of a cold at 70, at least that life had peace. However, he never gave up, he never has. He sees a flashback of Kim looking back at him. The man says he will stop these cultivators, but Sue has to stay alive. Sue, fallen on the ground in that past life, tells Kim it doesn't make sense. Why sacrifice himself for someone like Sue? He shouldn't fight them. But Kim looks back with absolute certainty and says he's seen Sue struggling infinitely until now. If he is talking to the Sue he knows, then Sue will inevitably see a better tomorrow. With that, Kim delivers the final attack on Mlehan. Because Sue's headless body has begun to move, slowly, driven by nothing but pure determination, pure will. Mlehan asks how this is possible. How can a mere mortal carry such a pure will? Soo Yoon Ryong, made of flesh and bone, practiced martial arts his entire life, his hand that lasted decades gripping a sword to the point where the grip itself was destroyed, the martial arts he had refined across every single one of his lives, the body that performed all of this, that carried this obligation. It stands tall even after its owner's death. In that moment, as Mlehan dies, the prince is filled with disbelief and fear because, even decapitated, Soo Yoon Ryong is smiling. And with that, this life of eternal body refinement came to an end. He sees Kim one last time. The man says that was a good cut. You need to keep going because your effort will never betray you. You need to carry the mindset that it's okay to die at dusk so that you can go further at dawn. Never forget, your efforts will eventually bring you to a new day worthy of the sweat you shed. And that was Soo Yoon Ryong's 5th regression. If you enjoyed the story so far, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to Yume Recap, and stay tuned for the next video.